This is Red Ice Radio, a beacon of sanity from Northern Europe. RedIceCreations.com.
Welcome everyone, glad to have you with us. My name is Henrik and this is Red Ice Radio, the program where we cover a lot of different topics and subjects. I hope you take the opportunity to also tune into some of the other programs that we have available for you on the website redicecreations.com. Our archives go back to 2006. Clif High, along with his associate George Ure, developed the WebBot, or the WebBot project, in the late 1990s. This is an internet bot software program, or a web spider, that originally was designed to predict stock market trends. However, it was eventually developed into something different, and now it's claimed to be able to predict future events by tracking keywords on the web. In 2009, when Clif last was with us, we covered how the WebBot worked in great detail, how the technology works, a few small details about the algorithms, what sources they use, etc. A very interesting program, I think, and this is still in our archives if you want to go back and listen. Today, however, in the first hour, we are going to get Clif's take on something completely different. We are going to discuss the story of mass arrests. If you have been following this, you'll know that author and speaker David Wilcock have been talking with a whistleblower, an alleged insider by the name of Drake, about the US military and the top military brass in the Pentagon and their secret plans to arrest people in high places, corrupt politicians, bankers, etc. Basically, all those who have been subjecting people to financial tyranny. Connected to this story is also Benjamin Fulford, a former with Forbes magazine who have been reporting and writing from Japan about the Yakuza and the White Dragon Society and their supposed opposition to the Western royal families and the Illuminati. Tied into this is also material about the severity of Fukushima being downplayed, and we are going to get Clif's take on all of this and much more. Before we begin here, I just want to mention a few things so that you know what's going on here. The following story that we are going to begin talking about here today is something that I've been getting quite a bit of email about lately. People want to hear more about it. They are excited and curious, and they want us to cover it here on the website, and that is definitely understandable. There are some pretty big claims being tossed around here, if I can put it that way. And if true, these claims needs to be questioned. We need to raise some issues and some points around these claims in order to try to understand them better. I guess that's what I'm saying. But I want to be clear in the beginning that we have now tried several times to get David Wilcock back on the program to give us his take on things. We've tried at 4 different times with one of his contact people, or maybe just the one contact person. I'm uncertain about that, but sure, I mean, that's fine. He's busy, we're busy. It doesn't always work out to connect and get together and do a show about it. So although we want to, have him on here first to talk about it, it hasn't panned out this way. We've also tried to contact Benjamin Fulford many times now without any success so far, to also get his take on things, to give him an opportunity if he's interested in doing so, in sharing his story with our audience here. So we do want to cover it and we do want to talk about it. So today we are going to do that, but we are going to cover it from a different perspective, a different point of view, one that is more critical of the claims made both by Benjamin Fulford, David Wilcock, and Drake, the so-called whistleblower. I wish we could have done this chronologically, if you will, start from the beginning and up, but it didn't work out this way this time. So anyway, we have Clif High with us on the line to talk about this and to give us his point of view on this very interesting and important and somewhat complicated story. So again, I just want to make it clear that this is not intended as an attack on any of these people personally. We've given them plenty of opportunities to come on the program if they were willing to do so, to discuss it, and in fact they're still invited if they want to come on to talk about it, if they so please. So it's an important story, and it's okay to look critically at it as well. This needs to be done, This is simply about questioning the material being presented and the ideas, or rather the approach, I guess, as well. We'll get into detail about this. But and I saw this, by the way, on Clif High's website as well, halfpasthuman.com, that he posted kind of a similar little disclaimer there, clarifying that this is not an ad hominem attack per se. This is about questioning the material that we have been presented with. So, with that, welcome back to Red Ice Radio, Clif High. It's good to talk to you again.
Thank you very much. Very good indeed, yes.
Thank you. There's been a lot of unfolding and a lot of buzz around this story, and we do want to get your take on it. And I guess in the beginning here, you could lay out as much groundwork as you feel is necessary to be able to explain it for some people. The story is long and it's drawn out. It's been unfolding over a couple of months now. There are some
much longer than that. It actually goes back several years now with Benjamin Fulford's, I would say, creeping development of the story, beginning with his initial attacks on the powers that be. If I can start right in here, what I'll do is I'll jump back then. And I first became aware of this because I'm a martial artist, and and as part of my work with Half Past Human, on a personal level, I have flags in my spiders that bring me new and interesting stories about martial arts, especially because I'm looking for particular developments in that realm. I had spiders specifically looking for new language combinations relative to the martial arts, and they brought me this interesting thing about this guy claiming that there were 10 million dojos around the planet with 100 million fierce martial artists ready to go out and stomp the shit out of the powers that be. And I thought, okay, fine. I'm a martial artist. I've been in the martial artists from judo at age 11 all the way through various forms of karate, both Japanese and Korean, all the way up into Aikido, and I've been doing this pretty consistently. I'm 58 years old. You do the math, it's been a long time. No dojo I've ever been in would any of the people I have been involved with in that dojo stir themselves to attack anybody on the orders of any of the powers that be in Japan that Benjamin Fulford were claiming were on his side and we're going to do this. It's a very complicated story, but you can look at it in two different levels. You can drill in on all the details which are spun out of the mind of Benjamin Fulford, amplified by the inaccurate conclusions and accepting mind, uncritical mind of David Wilcock, as well as the now pumped in information from, my opinion, powers that be via Drake, because they've discovered in their terminology that Fulford and Wilcock are useful idiots and are good mouthpieces for information that they want to have out there with a certain level of emotional histrionics involved. You have to understand that Benjamin Fulford has a couple of claims to fame, which he's used the claim to fame to attempt to claim expert status as a result of that fame. Now, I'm not a real fan of experts. I have no degrees myself, and I don't trust anybody who does because of a whole lot of reasons. We needn't go there, but Benjamin Fulford is saying that because he used to work for Forbes magazine, he is an economics expert. Right. I would tend to disagree. I've been in Forbes magazine. If you want to check, you can find my picture in one of their issues in the late 90s relative to my software called Vortex and a company, which was a precursor to Half Past Human that I was running. And they put me in Forbes magazine. As a result of being in Forbes magazine, I had to investigate it. Bear in mind, I'm not an financial or money aficionado. I came into all of this kind of stuff through the software and science world, and sort of stumbled into this component of reality. And so Forbes magazine calls me up and they say, hey, we want to put you in there. And I think, oh, Forbes, yeah, that's right. I've got this image in my mind of Forbes magazine equaling something like an American version of The Economist. Mm. And that could be no further from the truth. I mean, it is the opposite end of The Economist. It's the People version, People magazine version of the economics world. All they do is take your picture, pump you up, pimp you out, and slap you in there with a few hundred other whores for all of the other Wall Street guys to try and come and feast on you. And that's the whole point of Forbes magazine. All they do is collect information. They are not an intelligence outfit. They are an information collector for other people to come on in and eat up. Quite literally, they're part of the predatory capitalism thing. But so Ben Fulford, all he had to do was to be a personality spotter, not in any way an economics genius. So it's not surprising that the scheme or idea that he's presenting, in my mind, is grossly inaccurate in its view of reality, because he is not an economics genius, in my opinion, and the information he's presenting, that there's this whole new, I'm going to encapsulate it in a nutshell, and we go into the details.
Good to do that, I think.
Yeah, his idea is that there's the Yakuza, the Japanese crime syndicates that are honest criminals, honorable men who are criminals and don't make any bones about it, are going to get together all these 10 million dojos and force the powers that be to accede to being arrested in their tens of thousands, and their whole money scheme is going to be replaced by this giant gold-backed money scheme run by the Yakuza and parties that are unnamed but go by the name of the collective name of the Dragon family. And
is this the White Dragon Society, basically?
Correct, exactly. Many names in this thing. And again, I'm encapsulating and boiling it down to a thick syrupy mass, and we get into the details later, because my point is the details are actually immaterial. They do not matter because the whole thing is fictional. But my point on this is that his idea is that one money scheme, the current global petrodollar, euro, transnational forex managed scheme, will be replaced by another one in which money will rain down upon the masses of the people, and the powers that be will disappear overnight. That kind of a deal. So it's in my mind, it is yet again another external savior myth. Which is what they always hook us humans with. Doesn't matter if it's religion, science, philosophy. If you look deep enough, you'll find someone in there promulgating the idea that something outside of us is going to save us. And if you look at Ben Fulford's language, which I do because I'm a linguist, you'll find that throughout his entire message for the last couple of years has been this idea of the external savior coming to save us, and he's sort of like the prophet of all of this. Now, what has occurred is a relatively common phenomenon, and that is that someone with an uncritical mind and also a certain amount of fame, and that's David Wilcock, has latched onto Ben's story. Now, we have to understand that David Wilcock is not ill-meaning. He's not mean-spirited.
Is it fair to call him uncritical, though? He's done some really good stuff.
No. It is quite fair to call him uncritical, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
In my opinion, it is fair to call David Wilcock uncritical because his approach seeks for success. He said he vetted Drake. Well, he sought to prove that Drake was who he claimed. Therefore, he stopped as soon as he found the first piece of evidence that validated something in David Wilcock's mind, that Drake was who he claimed. Now, if any person in our reality that is based on having to go on out, for instance, and sail around to the planet or build a road or craft a building, knows you don't stop at the first point that proves your theory. In fact, your whole point in vetting someone or vetting a process is to disprove them. And I'll explain why. If you set out with the idea that you wish to disprove them, then if you fail, you succeed because they were legit. But if you succeed, you succeed because you've proven that they were a fraud, or, that your theory was fake, or it was a invalid way to approach reality. Mm-hmm. This is, in my opinion, the approach of a rational being in our reality. You set out with the idea of saying, I can't trust this. Now, David Wilcock always sets out, in my opinion, with the idea of finding the evidence to validate his opinion when he sets out. So he did not attempt to vet Drake, in my opinion, nor did he ever vet Fulford. All he did was find something that he could pin in his mind that said they were legitimate.
There was another person in there. I listened back once again today to the recording, the first one there he did with Drake, and he mentioned that there was another unnamed source, as far as I understand it, and that confirmed that Drake was the real thing, and that Drake kind of confirmed that he was the real thing. This is the difficulty, of course, when we have unnamed sources. We don't know who it is. We have no idea from our point of view, which must be understandable for David and everybody else who believes this as well, that, we can't know what's true or not. And anyone can say that we have, X amount of people out there that are verifying the story. But from our perspective, we only get what we hear, basically.
There you go. Now let's stop with that perspective right there. As rational beings, just the two of us, how shall we proceed? Shall we assume they're correct and base our movements through reality on that assumption, or shall we assume the opposite? Because there's really very little operating room in between. We find it very difficult to go along with the idea of, well, I'll not make a decision. Not many people can hold their mind in a state of deliberate indecisiveness. So I find it is easier to say, well, if I can't prove it, like I say, my pappy was from Missouri, which is the show me state. And around here, it's like, well, you show me and I'll start to think about that maybe I might someday in the future grant that it's real. I mean, I'm a skeptic, I'll grant you that, but it makes going through life a lot easier because I'm rarely going to run up against that real huge wall of disappointment that you get into with these cults of personality, which is basically what's developing here at the moment. We've got Fulford claiming that the Yakuza and the 10 million strong dojos are going to force a particular kind of an outcome. That's absolutely bullshit and bogus to begin with. There is not such a thing as a coordinated global dojo society that in any way is central authority. So there you go. There's Fulford citing that one central authority, this Yakuza-controlled central authority, is going to take on another central authority to save us. He doesn't get into how the Yakuza are gonna benefit. And in the end, you know what they're offering? This is the funny part of it. Fulford and Wilcock, and we'll leave Drake out of it, but Fulford and Wilcock are offering, saying that we're going to be saved by what? Yet another central authority imposing a money system on the rest of us. Right.
This is one of the issues. I try to wrap my head around the story, and in all honesty, I have a little bit of difficulty following it. I'm trying to get to the core, I guess, of what is being said to be able to make a decision about it. But, from my perspective, it's been somewhat difficult to do that in this case because I'm reaching somewhere out there to find the evidence for it. I mean, this program is all about listening to people, hearing about different perspectives, and there's many things we've talked about and will talk about in the future that is simply, aspects that we cannot confirm. And we listen to it, we talk about it, we hear it out, and that's always been my approach to it, which I think is a great idea. We just toss it out there, lay it out on the table, and people can make up their own minds about it. But in this case also, I just, from my own perspective, I've had a very difficult in pinning down some kind of evidence for it. Sure, this might be more things that are upcoming. There might be more things added to the story. So I don't want to jump to, prematurely on it as well and just say this is bunk and bogus. But I guess I've been wondering a little bit if some, sorry to interrupt, but if some people then are going to be replaced at the top levels of the elite, who is doing this? Who are they going to be replaced by? Or maybe the positions shouldn't be there at all. Go ahead, Cliff.
The even better question. Who are they going to report to when they replace the ones there now?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so because nothing would have changed, see? Meet the old boss, meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yes, there you go.
So it's just that situation all over again. And it's like, okay, Ben, that's fine. You've got this nice little storyline going, and I won't go into the idea that you can find discussed everywhere in psychology that the mind is so infinitely complex it can never be used as a device for examining self because we can never find the end of its twisty little trails. And it's always complex enough. Ben is not a stupid individual. He is not mean-spirited, in my opinion. I don't know what his issues are or where he's going with this, or why he's being driven to pursue it. I think I kind of understand what happened to David Wilcock and how he got caught up in it. The Drake person is I think he's a tool, in a lot of the different meanings of that. And he's welcome to call me up and dispute any of those if he wishes. And he's also welcome, if he wants to, come on in and be a mean bastard and we can get physical about it if he thinks I'm insulting him. But I don't find his participation in this to be benign. And I'm a linguist, and that's how I'm coming at it, is from the language that is expressed.
Right.
I could go through and detail all of this and explain it all out to you, but I'm just giving you an encapsulation on it, so we can get a little further. The idea that they are expressing, though, at its core, repeatedly, no matter what evidence may be propped up or proffered, in the future, remember, their idea is that one corrupt system will be replaced with another corrupt system. And bear in mind that the people that Fulford is holding up as his examples of the shining light of everything here are backed by the Yakuza and the White Dragon Society, both of whom are criminal organizations. Now, I grant you, personally, as a decrepit old bald bastard here in the Northwest, I've got no problem with the Yakuza. From my viewpoint, they're honorable individuals in this reality. Same thing with Tong members. They have they make no bones about their formula and basis for reality. They are not attempting to in any way trick you duplicitously the way the powers that be are, who are criminals as well. So I can see a certain level of logic in it, the anti-hero approach, right? Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, the whole point of it all is one corrupt system replacing another. So even if Ben Fulford is accurate 100%, and I'm absolutely inaccurate, I'm not going to buy into their system any more than I'm buying into the current one.
Well, exactly. That's, I guess, also my point of issue here is, we're still not in a system then which is where we have freedom for all. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not doubting that obviously the elite, the power in charge, have their own criminal ways and that they on their own level kind of don't deserve to be tossed out of the position that they're in, because it's a great disservice to all of us. But at the same time, if this is done by another similar force, what has really changed at that point? What
Correct. You'll find very few people that lived through the process who would say that Mao taking over from Chiang Kai-shek was a great thing.
Yeah, it's like arguing, well, it was bad enough under the Romanovs, and therefore it was better under Lenin and later Stalin, and there's some people who would actually argue that is the case as well.
Yeah. So there's my real bitch on all of this, the reason that I even spoke up, because I don't really care what kind of a story he's running. I'm not believing it. I'm not buying it. He's not getting any energy from me, so it's not a big deal. But then we ran into a couple of issues here. Enough people that seem to give a damn about what I say were also listening to him that they asked me, well, what's your opinion? And I had kept having to repeat it often enough that eventually I just wrote it up and put it on my site. And then there's the other issue is that Ben started straying over to an area that is much more pertinent. Now, bear in mind that Ben's savior myth, the external savior from the Yakuza and the White Dragon Tong, is someday in the future, okay? There's never a date given. It's just someday. All of it's very vague as to when it's going to occur. It's all happening now, but yet it's not actually materializing. And it's a big planet, so it'll take a long time for it to affect any of us. But at the same time, now he started to say things that like, oh, hey, the whole radiation thing from Fukushima is bogus, and that it's all because the people at TEPCO and the Japanese ministers and everybody are all in the pay of the cabal that we want to replace, that they're out there spewing their even the minuscule amount of information that they're actually putting out. Mm. Okay, and so now he's entering into an area in which he's impacting my reality, because I live here with my Geiger counter, my nuclear disintegration meter that reads gamma, beta, and alpha, and I take readings at least twice a day. And I know the reality of the 800 bar and the 600 bar millistream or millibar jet streams, and the flow from Japan over this way. And I know the reality of the radioactivity in the fish. I've got a lot of friends of mine all up and down the coast here, all the way up north into Alaska, all the way down south into California, all coastal guys. And we're seeing all kinds of strange things in the animals. The planet around us is changing. In that sense, I'm pretty much more of a tribal guy. I live out in the woods here, right? And so I'm very much attuned to my big veggies all around me. My giant 180-foot trees and I get along well, and things are not right on our planet. Mm-hmm. And Ben Fulford is saying just the opposite. In fact, if we believed what he was saying, he's saying I'm a liar. So I had to say to him, flat out, man to man, as honorable a being as I could be, expressing myself as factually and as honorably as I could, without saying any attribution to motive. I told him, I think you're lying, that I don't think you've ever had a Geiger counter in your hand, because And if you did, how do you know what the background radiation was before the episode? I can tell you now that I bought my first Geiger counter in the year 2003, and I was so fascinated with it that I just left it on for months and went through battery after battery after battery and kept a log of everything I heard. So I knew my background radiation running continuously through 2003, 2004, and 2005 when I got involved with other items. And I know now that we're at levels that are hundreds of times that daily. So I know what's going on, and Ben Fulford is going to get people killed with that attitude. So I don't care if he gets himself killed. If he wants to live in denial where he's at and what's going on with the radiation in Japan, that is his business. But he's also saying things about people that I am kin to through my dojo connections. Because bear in mind, lots of the dojos I've been involved with do have Japanese connections. And the center of many of the martial arts world was actually slightly to the southwest of the Fukushima prefecture. And so there's a lot of people there that are in a world of hurt that have no money to get out. And we're dealing with that at a dojo level, actually trying to raise money for people to relocate to us, what amounts to honorable relics and that kind of things,
right,
you know?
Right.
And so I'm living in that world, and it's not what Ben Fulford is saying about Japan. So he's giving a false impression or an ignorant one. And either way, he's got to be called on it.
Right. We're definitely going to talk more about Fukushima, your ideas about this and the severity of the situation, what really is happening and so forth. You have some interesting information about that. Before we leave the subject, though, there's some more things we want to discuss here, obviously. Now, I don't read or speak Japanese, and so I have no way of knowing if any of the information that Fulford is talking about is confirmed in any way from other sources in Japan, in Japanese. Have you come across any of such confirmation, correlating details, information, such?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah, actually, he's a reasonably good Japanese linguist, and his grasp of the underlying Japanese as opposed to the various forms of kanji is in my mind, really good. He does have factual supporting evidence, as does Wilcock. They can point to things like, I think it's up to like 800 plus now insiders have resigned their positions and are taking retirement at the ripe old age of, 39, that kind of thing, right? All these suspicious retirements, sudden vacation of very plush positions and everything.
Yeah.
As though, now this is where we start getting into the details of their whole story, and this is where it starts getting really murky. And the issue is that they point to something and they say, aha, I see a stone in the road. I know that stone moved there of its own volition, and that it did so because it was afraid of what was going to occur over here on the side of the road. And, the mail cart's going to come and flick it out into the middle of the road. Okay, but basically they're saying the same thing about these 800 people. They're saying these 800 people all resigned because they're afraid of our ninja hordes and what's going down and the mass arrests coming. I would proffer that these 800 people are part of the elite. The elite are deliberately crashing the system, which we could go into the cycle of that. Every 20 years, you poor fellows in Europe should have wised up and seen our experience. 20 years after we let in the Federal Reserve, they crashed it and they raped the country. So it was a Bohica, bend over, here it comes again time for y'all. And so, if we let the central bankers get into the Middle East, 20 years from now, they'll rape the Middle East and own all of their land. And as soon as the central bankers get into China in a big way, 20 years later, there won't be a Chinese thing left there. It'll all be owned by somebody in Israel. So, it's just one of those situations. The economic structure that is being proffered to us, especially by on either side, by Ben or by the powers that be, are all basically unsustainable. Now, what I find interesting about the whole problem with Ben Fulford and the other part of that stew is the offers of money for everybody, free. He's actually used terms like money would rain down on Europe.
Yes,
and it would solve the Greek problem. And what they fail to understand is the basic underlying principle that we all operate on. And by the way, they have factual information. There are trillions of dollars of bonds, U.S. Federal Reserve bonds, supposedly secured by gold that were indeed legitimate. This is the same scam that hit Germany in the 20s, though. Okay, when their central bank crashed them, there were all these bonds that were suddenly appearing that were people were trying to crash or cash. Basically, the scam is this. The Federal Reserve Bank goes over to China at the time of a war that they engineered going on, World War II, and they say to all these rich Chinese, you're going to be overrun by the Japanese here. We know for a fact you're going to lose all your property, and you're going to lose everything you've got. But we will loan you all of this money based against these the gold, and we will secure your freedom in a Western area where you won't have to worry about being shot as a warlord or, a local domineering bastard, and have all your goods taken away from you. And so they get all the gold from the locals. They take it back over to the Federal Reserve, just as Ben Fulford and David Wilcock are suggesting, and they give them these bonds to be redeemed at a later date when the whole world has settled down. And oh, by the way, when you give us your gold, we'll promise to give you back more gold because we're going to make a lot of money with this. And that itself is a scam. What everybody fails to recognize is, okay, let's stop and state that Ben Fulford at one point is actually saying that the Federal Reserve is an honorable institution, which is bullshit, because Ben Fulford and David Wilcock are saying that the Federal Reserve stashed this gold. What they don't understand is that there are people that do assays of the various minerals on the planet, and they can tell you down to basically the tonnage level as to what percentage of the crust is this mineral at this point on our planet's developmental history. Now, I maintain, as an aside here, that the expansion of the planet changes those ratios dramatically, and we're in one of those periods right now. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, the premise is that Ben Fulford and David Wilcock think that all the gold that the Federal Reserve stole from all the Asians in World War II, especially the gold stolen out of the Philippines, is stashed somewhere in big caves. And they're willing to listen to anybody that says that they've been in those big caves and they've seen these caves because they want to believe it. The real fact of the matter is the Federal Reserve had that gold. It did issue those bonds. And what it did was it sold that gold as soon as it got its greedy little hands on it. And then later on, it conned somebody else that it sold that gold to out of that gold and sold it all over again. And that's part of how it works. That's the whole banking scam. And if you'll note, there's a specific level of tonnage of gold on the planet, and all it does is change hands. Now, they do have accuracy. Getting back to the original idea of do they have evidence? Well, yeah, there is evidence. There are these bonds. But then, to a certain extent, they're saying, yeah, there's evidence that the feds are crooks, but we know they're honorable because they stashed that gold and it really exists somewhere. And that's where it all breaks down. Those bonds will never be honored, just the way they were never honored in the 1920s. And you can actually find a lot of economists that will argue that it was the phony bond surfacing that triggered the hyperinflation and the crash of that economy, just as we are having right now. Very curious.
I want to talk more about the idea that the system is being crashed intentionally. This is very interesting. There is a lot of talk about the Pentagon, personnel, I guess, then within the military and potentially within other places in other institutions in positions of power that in some level seem to organize according to the, some of the argumentation points, raised by the people we're talking about here, which also is very difficult to verify, of course. It's some.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Yeah. There is a component to this, all right? And I'll be a stand-up guy and I'll reveal a lot of stuff about myself that I would really rather not. But to be fair, Fulford puts his face on YouTube and I'm not willing to do that. So I'll put a bit of my history out there. Okay, Fulford and Wilcock are claiming that there's a lot of guys in the military that are going to run out and arrest banksters and politicians and throw them all into basically what amounts to some kind of a trial. And we'll have show trials just like we did with Stalin and this kind of thing. And it's going to all happen without a revolution. And it's going to all happen, and these individuals are going to tell Ben Fulford and David Wilcock specifically ahead of time so that they can inform the rest of us.
Warn and say, stay calm, it's all right, it's okay.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, well, that's all bullshit too. My dad was a lifer in the military, okay? My dad was inducted into the U.S. military prior to the Korean War through the draft process as a result of being displaced from Missouri, where his father killed himself when my dad was age 6. My father blew his head off with a shotgun in front of the family because of what the banksters did to him. So there's a bit of personal history to tell you why I have this anger. Okay. Now my dad, later on in life was displaced yet again because of banksterism, and goes into the Korean War. Okay, from that point on, he's a lifer in the military because he's found his niche. He's a warrior. I'm a warrior. I mean, it's in our birth patterns. He chose one route. I chose another. I wouldn't go into the military because I realized what the racket is. But let me take up to sort of a modern day kind of a thing. My father was good at his job. He got to the point where he was taking over regiments. He was like a regimental commander, brigade commander. I mean, he was a lieutenant colonel. He got promoted, field promotion from enlisted in Korea, and then took over and saved all these people. They wrote him up, this kind of shit, right? So he gets promoted all through the ranks. We get it as a result of this. I got my ass dragged all over the planet and saw weird shit as a kid, and I grew up as a military brat. And so, you kind of talk about disengaging yourself from the matrix around you. How can I say that, I've ever disengaged myself when my entire life, until I was about 16, I lived off of that, right? Through my dad's effort there. Nonetheless, so he gets up to the point where in 1968, he got a big promotion, 67 actually, and he was promoted to Lyndon Johnson's staff as a lieutenant colonel on his way to full bird and heading out to general, right? And they put him in charge of something, and we can go into it if you want. We need not bother. But he was the military liaison between the White House and the operation that we came to call the Chicago Democratic Convention. And all those riots and all of that business, right? Okay, within days of the completion of that and debriefing, he left. He quit. He volunteered to go back to Vietnam for the third time to get the hell away from there. And life was never the same for any of us in our family. And so so I know the military. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis in a bunker because of what my dad did and who he was. I'm the son of a lifer, a guy who chose that from the ranks. Not one of the guys who came out of West Point, not any of that level of the officer corps, right? So I saw it from the rough side. And Ben Fulford's lying. Those guys in the military are in a bind. They may indeed want to do this. There may be individuals that would want to do this. But bear in mind, their minds are controlled to the level that you cannot understand unless you live in it. And so every action they would want to take, there's 20 or 30 reasons already prepared in their mind for them not to take it. And these people are schooled in hierarchy in the reptilian mind to the point where they live in it constantly.
Right. You're talking about the breaking down of an individual as they go into the military, and then the rebuilding up of them again according to the standards that is set according to military protocol, meaning that it's very difficult for military personnel to break outside of the perimeter set for them. Is that a good way of explaining it?
Correct. Yeah. Their minds are so heavily controlled that the parameters that exist within their minds bind them to a reality. They cannot see a reality beyond that. My father existed in a level because he was spanning two worlds, because he was promoted into high-level officer corps. He saw it, but he saw it from a guy who was so traumatized by what he went through as a kid and the depression and stuff that it made an imprint on him that he never saw everything the way that they really wanted him to. And so I got an impression and was told a lot of things and lived with a lot of things that other people, especially as kids, wouldn't have been privy to. And I know it even in the movie 7 Days in May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was based on real action. That was there was a time there in the early 60s when there was that potential that there was going to be that breakout in the military, and they weren't going to buy into the racket that was Vietnam. And a lot of military people died as a result of their thinking. They were the first victims of, or persecuted for thought crimes. And they made a movie basically warning everybody else about it.
Interesting. If I for a moment can go back to some of the points you raised earlier, you asked,
Sure.
you mentioned that Drake is a tool, but basically, and of who? Do you have any idea about this?
I don't want to speculate. You can say Montauk, you can say MK Ultra. They're just labels. It's like I go out with my night vision goggles and I see these things flying around. Some things I think are human made, but who made them? Couldn't say. I can't see labels on those. I can't see any insignia, but I know they're there, and I know they're out there doing things. So Drake's language betrays the same level of control that you would see in a denser, grosser form in the people that speak for the political parties. He is speaking on an agenda, on talking points that have been delivered to him. I know this from the manner and the words chosen for his delivery of those talking points.
Can you give me an example of that?
I'd rather not at the moment. I may write it up, but I'd rather not because it might betray something I'd rather not.
Okay, let's follow.
If you wanted to go and listen to him, though, or read a transcript, that's even better. Read the transcript, and every time you feel an internal discontinuity, and as a native English speaker, I feel it. I don't know if you would. But anytime you feel an internal discontinuity in the way the language is being presented, then you know he's stepping outside of his real personality, and there's many of them within the first 10 minutes.
Well, I felt this throughout the whole thing in a way, because again, I just go back to that initial point. I mean, I've been doing this radio show for a while. I listened to quite a bit of information pertaining and surrounding these kinds of topics, and I just, again, had a very difficult time of actually pinning down what is being said here. I mean, can we get to the point kind of thing? And it could be me. I might be impatient. Maybe not be, 100% fair there or something. But that's just my initial feeling of what I got from it. That I tried to just wrap my head around it, I guess. But it was very elusive and difficult. But again, as I said before, I want to be fair about this, and there might be more stuff coming up about this. And I'm definitely willing to listen to it. My mind is opened, but not to the point that my brain falls out, that I've said before. So I'm critical about what I hear. I just don't adopt it into my belief system and immediately, run with it, if you know what I mean. So.
Sure. And that actually, the skeptic, have you ever read, what's her name? Pamela Meyer's book on lie spotting?
No, I do not recognize that. No.
Oh, she's really good. If you ever get a chance to interview her too, she's, tremendous. She gives you all kinds of clues to guard yourself against, deception. And tells you why, and why reality is so filled with deception, and why it's such a bitch, and why we deceive ourselves constantly, and this sort of thing. So, having read her material a long time back, having been involved with people that were con artists and seen how it all works and this kind of thing, you get to the point where you realize certain personality types are easy marks. This is why they're identified as, useful idiots in the military or the intelligence realm, right? And so David Wilcock, he's been pegged. They can feed him virtually anything, and if they feed him quasi-supporting evidence, he'll come to the appropriate conclusion that he thinks he actually concluded. That's the beauty of it, see, is that they show you a structure, and they never call it a barn, and they show you the paint and the wood and all of this, and they want you to come to the conclusion that it's a barn, and they let you come to that conclusion, and that's exactly what has happened here. And so these people have made certain conclusions that they then have such an intense emotional conviction of that they can sell it. Whereas if they were operatives and were presented with this to go on out and sell it, they couldn't make us happen. It couldn't happen. In fact, there's another diametrically opposed version of this that is collapsing right now, and that's this whole Thrive movement. Okay, because the whole Thrive movement is a propelled, say all the right things movement, in my opinion. Not, I'm just saying this is my opinion from looking at the language. Okay. They're saying all the right words, and yet there's absolutely no emotional conviction in it at all, and it's crashing, and it's not taking any kind of weight because the people behind it are, they don't buy it. They don't believe it. They're not able to sell it. It's a collective work. It is not a point of individual passion. And you need that individual passion anymore to be able to sell things these days, because people don't buy the idea of collective works anymore, because of the nature of the change of individuals ever since the internet came on, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay, let's follow along in your line of thinking and discuss two other points here then. What would be, one of them is what would be the point of this? And this kind of dovetails with another question that I had that goes into how far up this goes in the ranks. I know we kind of touched upon that before, and you're somewhat reluctant, or it's difficult to say, but do you think that they, the elite or whoever is behind this, then whoever provided, let's say someone like Drake with this kind of level of information, or are they worried?
No, Drake is a guy who would work for my dad. He would have been a guy that would have been working for my dad, no question. So somebody like my dad, a lieutenant colonel, maybe a full bird, told Drake what to say.
All right. Okay. It's on that level as far as we know, but that order could have been given from further up as well that we don't know.
Correct. And where the chain goes, that's why I don't answer why questions. I can't say what their agenda is. None of it makes sense, okay? Let me ask you this. Why are they pumping out hundreds and hundreds and trillions of pounds of aluminum in the air, in the chemtrails? There's many different explanations, but there's no real clear understanding of why. We know they're doing it. It's almost undeniable anymore by anyone, other than the willfully blind. And it's actually gotten to the point now where our biosphere is dying. We have a local tree around here called the madrona that is dying as a result of aluminum poisoning en masse. The madrona trees are just croaking right and left. They're just not going to survive. It has nothing to do with the freezing of the past years, has nothing to do with the weather. They're aluminum sensitive and they're all dying. The whole species is disappearing. It won't be long before our species is gone. We're aluminum sensitive too. So why is it occurring? I don't answer why questions because of the speculation involved. And speculation, like we see with Wilcox and Fulford, leads us into areas that are not productive.
Of course, but it does imply something. It probably means something, but the fact is that we can sit here and speculate and say all day what that means and even come up with scenarios that never was on the on the agenda to begin with. But
correct. And that's why I annoy the crap out of my wife and people like George Ure, is because I don't like to think that way. What I would rather think is, okay, I see them doing this. I see them polluting my environment with aluminum. How am I going to respond? Rather than waste my time figuring out what they're doing it for. I know there's also other things up there. Morgellons came down by way of the chemtrails. There's other issues going on involved, and it's highly complex. And I could, if I wanted, spend a lot of time thinking about it, but we don't have that time. We now have to start thinking in my opinion, in terms of how am I going to respond.
All right, more on that in a little bit. What I'm getting to here is that, or what I want to ask you again is, do you think that it means that whoever gives the order here are in some level afraid? I don't know if that's the correct word of grassroots movements, that they do want to try to destabilize this. I mean, inherently, I'm more suspicious, Cliff, and this is what I'm getting to, that we have a number of things unfolding throughout the last couple of years here. Occupy movement, WikiLeaks, Anonymous, that are like, whoa, wait a minute. These are big organizations in a way that are vastly changing the geopolitical landscape and people's minds out there. And so I take a step back and just look at this and say, wait a minute now, who's behind this? Why?
Okay.
Okay,
right.
go ahead.
That's what I would say as well. Okay, the who's behind it and why. But actually, let's dispute first off. Let's not make I'm very self-critical. Okay. I can barely stand myself as a human, let alone anybody else. That's why I'm a hermit in the woods. And that's quite true. I'm extremely self-critical. And that's why I'm very annoyed when I run across people like, Wilcock and Fulford, who are very talented and could be great beings in my opinion, but they're not self-critical. And so they don't analyze themselves and their own motivation and stuff. But that's another side. Okay. So the nature of what we're doing, though, is you're making certain statements that are not true. WikiLeaks hasn't changed the nature of our reality. Okay, it came off. It has a big splash. It was a nice show for a while. There's all kinds of drama involved. What's the net result? Ain't shit. We haven't heard anything that changed anything. None of it went to any level of fundamental change. It was all at the same kind of fake change that the minions and Obama and these kind of people keep pumping out.
And that's my point. That is my point. Okay. That it's a fake truth. It's a fake kind of revelation coming to us. But go ahead, Cliff.
Oh, okay. I was just going to confirm that, you know, and then when I go back and I finally say, okay, what's going on here? Because I expected more. Bear in mind, I had these guys pegged. I knew that we were going to enter into a huge period of release language, and I got all kinds of shit from the world for saying so months in advance. And that release language jumped me. It started 3 days earlier with the launch of that, ICBM off the coast of California. And then we hit that 63-day period where WikiLeaks came out and we had all the brouhaha. And I expected that it was real. And then I discovered, oh man, I'd been sold a bill of goods in a sense, because as a person, I read the data, saw the forecast, but I actually thought there was something underlying it as opposed to just the big, propaganda brouhaha to keep us all distracted. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was my own victim. So I'm saying let's not be our own victim here. And so I'm agreeing with you. Both of these things, the Occupy movement and this kind of thing, Not the solution. They're distractions. WikiLeaks is a distraction. If WikiLeaks comes on out and tells me that they murdered Pope so-and-so and they did this for this reason, and that the space alien agenda has been involved in the Catholic Church since back when, and every single one of these military patches that we see in the NASA things that have green eyes go directly to the space aliens that are controlling the intelligence agencies out of the Navy's largest intelligence base, which is in Kansas. Then I would say, okay, WikiLeaks is starting to tell us something that is useful, that is meaningful. But all this drama about Hillary and the other elites and getting us focused back on the celebrities and stuff, fuck it. I don't care about them, you know? Mm-hmm. They can go rot in hell. Ratzinger I don't care about as a person. He's an evil bastard, and I have a personal history that goes back to the Catholic Church in Germany that we can go into some other time if you want. But as an individual, he's not worth killing. You know, he's as much a stooge as the guy who wants to be king of the planet. What's his name? Not Michael. David Rothschild.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
These people have their strings pulled. I used to, when I was, still working software in the 90s there, and I was all wrapped up in my projects and stuff, I got really irritated because it looked like, the bastards in, the political realm. This was when I didn't really grasp what was going on, bear in mind. Okay. I was still fascinated by my mind's ability to invent things and was just pursuing that. And so I kept stumbling across this stuff. And for a while I was really pissed at George Bush and all these guys, right? And because they were taken and they were going to kill my people, my friends, the people I grew up with in the military, my cousins. We lost more men in my family in Vietnam than, I'm one of the very few that are left. I'm a survivor in that sense, but I'm the remnant of the DNA line because so many of us got killed off. And so I have this personal thing about these individuals being thrown into harm's way when they are just brilliant, creative people that can go on out and we could fix the damn planet if we weren't focused on killing somebody on the other part of it. And so I got really irritated at George Bush. But George Bush, I actually went to the trouble of investigating it. And this poor twisted being, was shoved around and maligned and maimed by the satanic bastards that are his parents. And,
Right.
So we are a gigantic planet. We are a dysfunctional family. And we need to face this at a personal level. So my heroes now are like, my personal hero is like Michael Tsarian, because he's grasped at least the central core of this. Now, I can't let go, and I'm a failed individual in many levels, so I'll never be as good as he is. But he grasped the only thing you can really hold is your consciousness. The only thing you can do to save the planet is to mold your consciousness on a daily basis, continuously.
Right.
David Icke grasps this as well. And there are a few others out there, Then there's people like myself that are too into their warrior nature. We're just born that way. My cells just want to react, So there's quite a few people I want to pound into a little bloody pulp. I can't help it, and I feel bad for myself, and I apologize. It's not a good thing, It's not a thing for an Aikidoist, but I've got to be honest. I've got to take the Bruce Lee route and say, the hardest thing on the planet is to be fucking honest with yourself. The second hardest thing is to express yourself honestly. And so I've got to say I've got that in me. And so I live out in the woods, and I deal with that because I am not someone that you would put into a situation. And so, I will do things. I will withdraw when I know that my contentiousness is not going to aid it. And thus, when I don't control them or involve myself with the Webbot forum or the Webbot radio guys, those things sprung up on their own. They interviewed the Thrive people. They asked me to participate. I went so far as to provide a couple of questions, but I did not participate because I know that I would not have let it go, that I would have taken that Foster Grant fellow there, and I would have, or Foster fellow there, and I would have just gnawed on him and pulled on him and tugged on him, and it would have been contentious, and it would not have aided anyone, and I don't know that it would have even aided me in getting closer to the truth.
Yeah.
And it would have irritated everything, right? But there's, again, it's like the Wilcox and Fulford thing. There's a vagueness, there's a morass, a softness that you can't come to grips with, that you just keep disappearing into. It keeps retreating ahead of you when you get involved in all this Thrive crap. And so I know it's not, let's put quotes around it, real.
And what is evidence to some will not be that to others. We're all different. We have different of opinions. We're all, we have a different approach to life, a different philosophy. This is just the nature of how things are. I don't ever think we can sit down and like agree, yep, this is the way it is or should be done or should be handled. This is simply about,
scare me if we
yeah,
did.
exactly. I know.
Because then I know we'd be absolute mind control Borg slaves under a central authority. What I really like is contention, aggravation, release language, all kinds of crap happening all the time everywhere, such that nobody really has a handle on it. So I know that the political parties, they're criminal gangs being run by a guy at the top that says you all do this, And the media, let's call them what they are. They're propaganda whores,
That's right.
And boy, they get rewarded really well. It's like, okay, Wolf, you and the guys over at Fox News and stuff, enjoy yourselves. I don't want to be dark and foreboding and stuff, but you're not real individuals, and you will discover this when you die. And it's just not a good thing. And there's, you have all of these, if you want to get really, bizarre about it, you have all these religions out there and spirituality, approaches that say, do this, do that, and do this and everything. What's their whole point? Well, they're all talking about this point of transition that we all call death. Well, why do you think the Catholic Church went to such a great trouble over centuries to destroy the indigenous populations? They didn't really care about the indigenous populations. They want them as slaves. They wanted to preserve them. But what they had to destroy was the knowledge and the processes that were involved in the shamanic traditions.
Yep.
And from my viewpoint, from a personal viewpoint, I'm like an internet shaman. Okay. I've gone that route. I've gone the psychedelic route. I've gone the meditation route. I've seen that shit. And, you can believe me or not, does not matter. I can say the words and just grin, and you can see my, smiling face here as I say them to you, that, I've seen the other side. I've seen the bardo. From this perspective, I have seen the bardo, and you bastards are not going to like what you're going to find there when you suddenly look around and see that huge mass of karma you're dragging, And people have come back. I'll tell you, people have come back from the dead and talked to me in that position when they're in those 49 days of the bardo, and they've told me about it. And there's no words involved, and you can't get into it in a word way. But again, fear goes away if you're an honorable being here. So in many regards, the Yakuza that Ben Fulford holds up, those individuals that are murderers and killers and so forth that are working out their own twisted karma, they will have far less of time in the 49 days in the bardo than Wolf Blitzer and Hannity and George Bush and these other bastards. I feel for them.
It's an individual journey, a path that the self must walk and discover, and anything is possible in the beyond, I think, in that way. And I think what this will be or mean to different people will be different depending on how we've lived our lives and what we try to do and how we try to better ourselves or not, to go against the grain, as it were. But let me just go back a little bit more here. We're going over a little bit on the hour, and that's fine. We need to talk about some more things here before we finish up on the first segment here. But let's go back to the resignations thing. That people are laid off, people are fired and such. Murdoch's empire is partially taken down. Strauss-Kahn is hanged out to dry. Lehman Brothers goes down. Is this consolidation of power, do you think, that we're seeing in the world right now?
There's certain trends there that you're correct. There's a certain coagulation to a thick syrupy mass as you move into the Depression. That occurred in the 30s and occurred in 1890, occurred in 1861. So yeah, that does happen. However, what we're also seeing here is the Fulford and Wilcock pointing to an aggregation and saying that all of this aggregation occurred for a single point of a view that they have. So, for instance, there were a lot of these resignations, the 800 and something, that occurred last year, early last year, and some that occurred for personal reasons, some that occurred for reasons people being arrested. So, a lot of them are not of a central motivation. However, there are enough central motivation resignations and other strange things going on with the elite, some of which have been tagged by Wilcock and Fulford for their evidence, that I grant you there's a wave of change going on out there that they have at least had the perception to see. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They're attributing a certain level of action and motivation to it that I would not, but they're seeing it as I do.
Right. I think I understand what you're saying. Are we just being? There's this idea of I heard Wilcock mention that there is a lot of people out there just spreading fear, and I guess from his point of view, maybe he's trying to inject some level of positivity as well into all of this. I mean, are we just being pessimistic for not believing what we're being told here? What's your take on that?
I don't know. I don't live in that world. I live in a world with what we could say is righteous or real suffering. Where beings die, where they get sick, where they spend 10 years dying. So I live in a world of suffering. So the idea that, the birds are going to sing and the sun's going to come out in perpetuity, the chemtrails are going to stop and free pie for everyone. No, I don't buy it. Anybody's telling me that has got something to sell. My dad had this saying once. So let's see if I can recall it. He said, life is shit. Anybody telling you different is trying to sell you something. And he's correct. Now, admittedly, that was after his, third tour in Nam, and he'd seen some stuff he'd rather not, but he's quite correct at that. There is deserved suffering, right? I get a saw blade through my leg, I must suffer the consequence of that act. There is no instant cure for that. You've just got to go through it. So I don't live with that kind of mind, and I cannot reconcile myself to that view. And I actually won't have it. Just as I won't have in my presence, I won't have the crap from the TV. It's bullshit. It's as much a lie as the Fulford shit. Why should I stand here and listen to that when I know it to be untrue?
People want to believe also very bad. We're now in bad need of something positive news right now. So I think that's also a tendency, maybe why people are. I'm not saying that everybody is jumping on this, or even if they are, that they're 100% wrong. That's not what this is about either. But there is a need for some positive news in all this, because it's quite depressing out there at the moment, right?
Oh, it's depressing as hell.
It's very interesting, listening to you about this, Cliff, getting a different take on this story. And as well, on top of it, as we know, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And that's all we're kind of, talking about here in a way. We were trying to understand what is being said and how we can, believe what is being said, and also why we shouldn't to some extent until more things become available.
Right, exactly. It goes back to that same issues that they used to have in the old Cold War crap. And do you remember Reagan saying the trust but verify?
Right. Yep.
Okay, well, there's a hidden side to that you never hear stated. If you can't verify, you can't trust.
That's right.
Okay, so I can't verify any of the stuff that Fulford is saying about, or Wilcock, or any of these people are saying about unnamed sources. So I can't trust any of them.
But we can believe.
Right, correct. Now, and also, let's. I don't really need to get into that level of it, but it's really true that we do need positive news, that we are in a huge level of very depressing facts coming to light simply because of the huge amount of the internet, and the fact that you have a disparate level of awakening people, a growing number of awakening people that will find different parts of the awakening process to be intriguing to them, so they'll root out different things that the rest of us haven't seen, and they'll bring it to our attention, and the whole thing seems just huge and giant and overwhelming. And it's all quite true. And it is huge and giant and overwhelming. And I have found very little positive coming out in the way of the individual facts, but I have discovered that to a certain extent you get to the stage where you realize that you're faced with your own duality. Again, we go back to like the Michael Tessarian, your own grasp of your own consciousness. This is the only thing you can control, is your attitude, your response. And even that, you have to acknowledge the biology controls you, the sun controls you, the moon controls you. All of these things exert influence on your consciousness. If you're not cognizant of that, you are not cognizant. So if you're making decisions on a particular day and you're not aware that there's a full moon that day, you are not an aware individual making aware, competent decisions. And so if you get to that point, then you realize, maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility that the universe is indeed unfolding as it should. And that my task is to reconcile myself to a level of acceptance as opposed to flogging it to death. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is a very, very, again, going back to the Bruce Lee thing, because here you come back to honesty at a level that is internal. And this, I would maintain that you could have an honest con man. You could have a guy who lies to the world every single syllable he says, but is inherently honest to himself because he doesn't lie to himself, and that would actually be an appropriate response to a planet filled with deception. That wouldn't be an enlightened individual, because the enlightened individual would not fear being honest in the face of all the deception. But we must come to a way of, as you say, reconciling or discriminating to the oppressive mass that is coming out now and will continue to come out. Believe me, we have not even scratched the surface. I know stuff that makes me weep. I'm a 58-year-old guy and I'm pretty tough, right? And I've been turned into an emotional basket case by the stuff that's coming out about what the Catholic, Anglican churches and their master, the crown, that is to say the queen and her husband, have done to the indigenous population just north of me here in British Columbia. And I won't go into the details there, but they closed down some orphanages up there. And the Catholic Church did everybody a huge favor before they closed down the orphanage. They had 20 feet of soil hauled in to cover up the entire grounds of the orphanage, 20 feet thicker.
Right.
They had layers of cement poured into the basements of those buildings. And they had real good reason to do that. This kind of stuff, this level of knowledge, cannot, in my opinion, you're not all that human if you're not affected by it. And I don't know that I want to know you if you're not affected by it. So we are in an oppressive state, but there is something we can take out of this. And that is that I have not willingly participated in any of this as an individual. I may have willingly, as an individual, participated in the structure that allows such things to exist and continue. But from the point of my discovery of that, I no longer participate. And so I can be honest and I can have acceptance. I can acknowledge my depression. I can get a certain amount of resolve out of it. And I can seek for what happiness has allowed me in this universe. But I, as an individual, have never assumed, probably because of the tortured nature of my own childhood, that happiness was offered to everyone or was that everybody deserved it. Or not deserved it, but, that the planet was supposed to deliver it. Makes sense? There's a lot of people that are sold that, 1950s around here, in the 60s in the United States. I didn't live here in the United States then, so I wasn't influenced by the TV, but I saw that stuff later as reruns, and it's like, wait a second. They're telling you here that, this whole 1950s structured cube world is basically the same crap that's in the Catholic interpretation of the Bible. And by the way, if anybody really wants to hear what the Bible actually has to say, there's this marvelous guy out there, Mario Biglino, who was paid by the Vatican to translate the Bible from the actual source material. And he translated 23 books of it. And then one day he found out what they were doing with his translation and said, enough, he's not participating, and they canned him. But talk about a linguist. This guy is just beautiful to listen to, even if you don't understand a word of Italian, just the passion in his voice. But he's out on YouTube, and you get a real understanding of what's been going on. Of what's happening here. And we need something, I grant you that. I'm not the person to ask for that because my role on this planet is not that. I'm more on the dark side.
It's very difficult when we're being when we end up in these different isms that promise us a certain set of experiences as we come to this planet, I guess I could say, that everybody deserves this or that. It's the same thing with socialism, that they offer you some kind of egalitarian paradise. It is not equal in that way, and there's nothing, as far as I know, that says that life is supposed to be just. It doesn't mean that humanity shouldn't strive for it and be fair and all that, but as we come here, there's no instruction about that, as far as I'm concerned anyway. But what about the argument then that thoughts, intention, and what we choose to focus on creates reality? If we only focus on negative aspects, this is what is going to manifest itself in our lives. We're going to end up in downward spinning spiral because of it.
And so on. Okay, well, that's true at a very facile surface level. Okay, that's true at the positive thinking produces positive results, law of attraction level. Okay, and I can argue on a energy level why that happens, what happens when the karmans get that intention going on out, and why that has an immediate and facile surface shallow result, and why it fades. And none of those are really pertinent because anybody who cares to try the experiment cannot keep it up. They can't have the law of attraction continue without resorting. Well, basically, you're talking about the same thing that the powers that be do, but they really know what's going on. You want to have that law of attraction stuff work. You want to have it continue and supplant have universe provide you with glory, riches, wealth, and everything you want. Then you've got to crawl into a dark hole in the middle of the night on a particular spot on the planet. With moss and darkness around you, a barely flickering candle, and you've got to take out a knife and you've got to cut an infant open and consume part of that being. And you've got to do it at a particular time under a particular ritual situation. And most of the people that do that, we call the elite. And they can work it because it's that level of magic. So intent, I could also argue that, okay, that's bullshit on one level because you can't tell me what your next thought is going to be. You can't tell me when you're going to have an aha moment. You're not going to be able to tell me when you're going to be able to have a burst of creativity. Therefore, you're not in control of your own thoughts. And it could be argued that you're merely a standing wave receiver with specific frequencies and tunings so that you will receive specific kinds of thoughts. And so I had the idea to form the series of software programs that led to the creation that George Ure called the web bots. And you didn't because I'm tuned that way and you're not. You had the idea to be a really cool red ice guy because you got that tuning. And the guy 4 desks over from you who may have had close to it is working for you.
So we have that idea that the decision to move your arm comes from somewhere else. We actually don't have any free will. This is just based on the impulses. Go ahead.
It's much more complex than that. Much more complex than that. You have to understand that you don't control where your mind does not, at the level of consciousness, as far as your little c consciousness in your body is concerned, it doesn't control where the skin ends and the atoms of air begin. Okay, so you're not in control of your body. You have no absolute control over that. The most you can do is to these crude levels of control of feeding it or not feeding it, breathing or not breathing. And even then I can argue you can't not breathe. But you could not eat yourself to death, okay? So you'd have that level of control. But you couldn't say, when I get up from this chair, I'm going to take parts of the chair with me. But there is no distinguishable difference between the atoms of your butt and the atoms of your clothing and the atoms of your chair. And so if you really were in control of that, you'd constantly be having to filter out the stuff that would intrude on you. Now, as a shamanic energy being here, I know it's much more complex than that. And I know, for instance, that eczema is a condition of disturbance within the energy body that can be corrected, but arthritis is in fact, at least the kind that I have, non-rheumatoid, but rather what they call inflammatory arthritis, is an invasion from an energy parasite. And you can control some aspects of that invasion of the energy parasite, but killing it is a bitch to get rid of it 100%. I've actually been able to do things like reduce visible nodules and distortions in my joints caused by this energy parasite and isolate it to a couple of joints, but I've not been able to kill it. But I was able to cure 100% eczema that had existed for 20 years once I caught on to how all this stuff works. Further, I was even able to describe it in such a way that a woman told her 5-year-old daughter, I believe, how to do it, and she was able to cure her own eczema just because she was so innocent. She didn't know better, and so she meditated on it and figured it out and cured it. So the world is not as we are told. The idea that you can decide I'm going to have nothing but positive, harmonious thoughts is bogus. I would defy that. And in fact, such a state of continuous bliss is not life as I would describe it. Life requires necessary suffering, ups and downs, continuous, disharmony, if you will, and struggle. And that's the point of it. Now, you can get into the Buddhist level where they say, well, there's the universal consciousness, the grand universal consciousness, and all the shades of consciousness down to the thick, syrupy mass that is the condensate that is your body. Because your body is also conscious, independent of you. It will keep breathing even if your consciousness is separated from the body under certain circumstances. So drugs only separate your consciousness so far, but I know people that can meditate so much that they can drift away so far that they won't breathe without a minder. And so you've got to get them back to the level of their body. So they have really good consciousness, much greater than the anesthesiologist could deliver. So I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. You know?
All right.
I could do that. I actually have faced the choices, shall I take this path or shall I take the other? And I chose to go the dark route because of certain things, but I could have done the intention route. I could have done the intentional sacrifice and gone the, media propaganda horror route. I've had that offered to me and had it presented, and it wasn't attractive to me, so it was a waste of time for me because of where I am and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But because that was exposed to me and I saw it, I know how that works, and it's dangerous, and people need to be advised of that. It has blowback.
All right, interesting, really good. And now I want to get into more detail about Fukushima in the second hour, but I know that there's something you want to kind of detail here before we wrap things up with the first hour. So let's do that right now then, Clif.
Sure. Real quick. And I really appreciate your hanging on for this. But because we can go into all the reasons I've had troubles with the data and so on, later on, but I have 2 points of interest about Fukushima. And let's just say Fukushima and or also other nuclear events. And I have 2 particular dates, and they're July 10th and December 14th. The linguistics that I have for July 10th indicate that they're going to have a big shock, an energetic response, a giant noise on July 10th relative to the nuclear situation. So my mind at this stage is pegging that to Fukushima. There are some indications that Fukushima is involved as well, but I don't have a surety just yet because I'm early in the process. I also, though, do have a temporal echo for whatever occurs on July 10th will either reoccur, be abated, or be controlled on or by very close to December 14th. The word that's associated with the December 14th occurrence is resolution. Not in a good way, though. Mm-hmm. And that's basically because I've been asked, was there anything in the data? I thought I would get it out in this portion of the interview, and I thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk more about it, obviously. The website is halfpasthuman.com. Where do people go to find out more about the analysis that you guys are doing there?
If you go to the upper right-hand corner, you can see about our processes and practices. They've got a column of various rants and raves and other sorts of articles, some of which you can pick and choose, some of which have good stuff in them, and others I'm just blowing off steam. And then we have our reports, and if you're desperately poor and you're a regular human and you can't afford it, you can always ask us for a report and we'll send it to you for free. But please, everybody needs to bear in mind, we've just discovered how egregiously we've been ripped off by these giant corporations that literally were circulating tens of thousands of copies of our reports. I won't go into that as well, but so I'm giving them away for free, but if you could not rip us off, it would help everybody's karma.
Absolutely. Go to the process page that Clif mentioned there up in the top right corner and scroll down. You can get the latest ALTA report right there and read more about all these things, of course. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these aspects in the second hour and what some of the language, if you will, is pertaining to Fukushima. It's going to be interesting. Stay with us, Clif. Thank you for this first hour. halfpasthuman.com. We'll be back with more in a little bit.
I was looking at the TV news. People everywhere blowing abuse. People everywhere under the gun. Little kids dying of a head on back. Human beings taking up their brains. You're better but you're all the same. Think you're clever but you're all to blame. Here we are again in the same old flame. Shut up, I'm talking to you. It's on television so it can't be true. And I can't play that game no more. Wake up and see it through. You're ready to save the view. I know what the blind man sees. I can be the
Next, with Clif High, we are going to get into more detail about Fukushima, the radiation situation, and what kind of language that Clif has been getting from the webbot relating to this nuclear disaster. We are going to discuss Stuxnet and the connection to Israel when it comes to Fukushima. We are also going to discuss a very unorthodox approach as a potential fix for the problem with Fukushima. Clif goes into the work of Dr. David Andersson about creating a time bubble around Fukushima, around the reactors. With time-closed loops, we could basically bombard Fukushima with time. We could effectively be speeding up the half-life within the bubble or the closed loop. And by the way, Dr. David Andersson, who claimed to have worked on time travel research and time control, has completely disappeared off the radar, it seems. Later, we discuss artificial intelligence versus an alien artificial intelligence. Our thoughts and reality is being shaped by language to a certain degree. Clif also shares his opinion on the movie Thrive, and much more that we can outline here right now. We are going to proceed for another 2 hours. If you want to listen, you can do so in our members area. All the information on how to obtain a subscription is on the website redicecreations.com. We have well over 500 programs in our archives for you on a vast array of different subjects on many different areas and opinions. This is material and research that hopefully will make you question, learn, and broaden your perspective. That's what it's all about. Next on Red Ice Radio, we have Diana Johnston joining us from France, talking about the Toulouse murders, the French election, and the future of the European Union. After this, we have Holland van den Nieuwenhof and James Lane talking about their film A Noble Lie, about the Oklahoma City bombing back in 1995. Then after this, we have Tom Horn, Louise Turry, Dean Clifford, John B. Wells, Ian Crane, Neil Kramer, Richard Merrick, Nora Gedgaudas, Britti and Tom Secker, Richard Grove, Winter Lake, Alex Newman, Peter Haldorsson, Eric Karlström, and Jordan Maxwell, to name a few. But right now we are going to continue for 2 more hours with Clif High. This is the second segment, the members hour here together with Clif High. Welcome back, everybody. A big part of the worries that you raised specifically regarding some of Fulford's claims, Clif, specifically was about the radiation bit here now and what he states about Fukushima. Why don't we discuss a little bit, what's going on with this and some of the things that you see unfolding based on your language analysis. I mean, how bad is it? And as we hear, of course, it could get worse pretty quick, actually.
Well, it's very terrible here on the west coast of the U.S. I bought my first Geiger counter from Bob Lazar, UFO Area 51 fame, right?
Sure.
Okay, got it from him in 2003. He's a erudite, helpful individual. I was already fairly cognizant of what I was doing because I'd had some years of laboratory work. But he aided me in the choice and directed my screening and stuff, and I set out establishing a base. So from the year 2003 to the year 2005, when I just got bored with it, our background radiation up here at 47 degrees north latitude, 22 degrees, 22 minutes north latitude was one disintegration, one radioactive click every 7 or 8 minutes. It rarely exceeded 8 minutes and was rarely less than, it also rarely exceeded the range of 7. So it's usually in that range of those 2 minutes. And so now bear in mind that was steady from 2003 through 2 whole years, even through the period of time when we had large amounts of incoming gamma rays and so on. Now, at that time, I was not specifically hunting for gamma. I was only doing specific radiation studies. I won't go into the details, but I got a nice background, generalized background knowledge at that point. Now I've got the ability to do alpha, beta, and gamma studies. So my ability now is heightened. So we can't say that everything is the same, right? You got to be aware of this as you go along.
Yeah.
I'm now much more attuned to it and this kind of thing. But if I turn on my Geiger counter right now, or as I did earlier today, barely 2.5 hours ago, we were running at about 74 clicks a minute.
Wow,
74
that's an increase.
disintegrations.
What does that mean, though, for people who don't know the stuff with the Geiger counters there?
Okay, a Geiger counter is a funny little instrument. It's got this tube of a gas in it, and as a piece of radioactive material. Radioactive material is like this happy little atom that just throws off its bits. It's in party mood. It just throws off bits of stuff every now and then. And so these Geiger counters, they just sit around as tubes waiting for a little bit of radioactive material to come zinging by, and then they record it. As it goes through this little bit of gas, the gas molecules change their electrical potential and excite some other electrical gear, and a little bit is flipped and a signal goes off on your machine that goes bing, a little ping noise, a click. And so it happens every so often when you, through random happenstance, happen to have this little tube approximately 4 inches long, get in the contact and get hit by these disintegrations. So you understand it's not in any way, shape, or form a thorough examination of the radioactivity in your environment. You'd have to sweep your whole area repeatedly, continuously to understand what's going on. It's really a happenstance kind of a thing, and even then it's scary. Now, so back in 2003, I'd get one of these clicks every 7 or 8 minutes, telling me that a radioactive disintegration had happened, and it happened to strike my little monitor. And I was happy. I was happy as a clam. Oh, click. Hey, I got something, Well, all right. Well, now I'm not so happy.
Yeah.
Because I get those damn things all the time, because we are now, instead of getting one every 7 or 8 minutes, well, when Fukushima happened in the first month, it went from one every 7 or 8 minutes up to about 30 or 40 a minute. And I was very alarmed. How
quick? Do you remember how quick that was?
Sure. My viewpoint, I started checking almost immediately, and I started recording my first frightening day was on April, I can actually go and look, but it was either April 13th or 14th.
Mm-hmm.
So barely a month later.
Wow,
a little over a month and 2 days.
Yeah.
Okay. Something like that. And it was so frightening. I had just at that point, I had these two guys, Kale and Lettuce, that were working for me, young kids, and I told them, we can't work outside today. I'm just too freaked out. We're at 40 clicks a minute, and it's coming down in the rain and the fog, so we just have to, so it started affecting our lives as of April of last year. And I did not understand what was going on at the time. Or where I would be this period right now, because here we are at 70 and 80 clicks a minute, and that's a light day. When it rains, I can easily hit 240 disintegrations in a minute. It's too late for me now, right? If I were attempting to avoid radiation, I should have left the West Coast within that 30-day period, probably after Fukushima had happened, and gone south of the equator. It's probably too late for most of the people across the United States and for a good portion of Europe relative to the exposure to Fukushima. We've had a number of hot spots here. I had something that was so hot, a piece of radioactivity. Bear in mind that within the first month, I also started sweeping the food. And I think it was 3 months later, we got a period that was so hot and my meter died. I don't know what caused it, but it peaked out one day, and the little tube just gave up the ghost. So I had to get this new grader meter from Bob, and really got an education then about the gamma particles and all the rest of it. But there's various different kinds of radioactive material. And in the first period of time, there's the radioactive iodine, which at a light level, you can take potassium iodine and protect your thyroid against. If you're a kid, it doesn't matter to me. I'm 58 years old. Something that's going to kill me long before 30-year cancer does, right? But there's nothing that will protect you from the strontium and the cesium and so on. We're seeing people now, and I will give you anecdotal evidence. There's no statistics. No one's going to back it up, but it's rather odd that, our government denies that there's any radioactivity, and yet, our local government here on the West Coast, our local governments are all now all of a sudden, testing all the seafood for radioactivity. It's rather odd that the federal government denies there's any exposure, yet I've got friends of mine that are avid hikers or skiers or snowboarders, so they're up at high altitudes, coming down with very rapid onset leukemia at very young ages.
Really?
Very strange, where they're healthy, and then 30 days later they've got white blood cell counts well over 100,000, and they just can't figure out what's going on. They think they've got the stomach flu. They take them to the hospital, and they keep them at the hospital because they're so freaked. And these are people who spend a lot of time at 6,500 feet or higher in our local Cascade Range or the Olympics and the marvelous hiking that's available. But it doesn't matter anymore because our local seafood is now polluted. I've been able to test with the new Geiger counter I've got the seafood levels around here. And I've also got friends of mine that work at local Fish and Wildlife. I worked for years in the habitat division of the Fish and Wildlife and IT support, writing software for the burgeoning digitization of our entire resource industry here in the West Coast, right? So I've got all these contacts within the fisheries world, and there's a lot of people that say, nope, I ain't going to eat that anymore. And these are avid fishermen that used to spend all their time not only working for the resource, but also catching it.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from people in the U.S. Via email primarily who talked about they've seen weird things in terms of stillborn and mutated calves. Things of this nature. I can't remember what it was. Was one animal was born with 8, two set of legs or 4 set of legs.
Sure. And that kind of thing, though. Okay, now you've got to be careful about the level of mutations because those always occur. We also have to be careful about mutations in animals because animals are a lot more sensitive to gamma level mutation, which can occur from space. And in fact, our primary level of gamma radiation is from space. So I'm of a tendency to think that, well, if we get an extraordinarily high level statistically, then I'll buy into this particular mutation being caused by the radiation from Fukushima. Okay. But you have to understand that in order for the DNA to be destroyed for that particular calf, you've got to go back into the DNA at a particular point in the process in order to get anything like a normal conception as a result of damaged DNA. You're much more likely to see radiation effects, which we're seeing all over the West Coast here, in plants, and much more likely to see it in the fast turnover life like seafood, okay, where the fishes go through cycles in some fishes in as little as 6 weeks. Or in some cases, you've got long life seafood like, or not seafood, but sea life like octopi that will put off polyps for years. There you will see the mutations because the type of life they are, the polyp that puts off the completed jellyfish or other form will put off a mutated form of it more easily because of the nature of life it is, as opposed to the, if you will, the denser form that you find in the calves. Although I'm not discounting that we're going to start seeing that because there's cesium and strontium all over the place. On the other hand, though, I had this argument with a friend of mine the other day. He was saying, oh, yeah, you got to buy this. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You're going to spend an additional $1 for organic food when all the organic food is now covered with, 98,000 times the allowed level of aluminum. And what does organic mean in the age of chemtrails and Fukushima? Yeah. And I'm of the opinion from the language I've got in the database that real soon we'll see an upsurge in a particular market within eBay and other online auction places, right? And you're going to see something that is basically like an outgrowth of the Mad Max movies, and you're going to see the pre-Fuk food. And you're going to see people like offering pre-Fukushima canned butter, $1,000 a kilogram. Jeez. You'll see pre-Fukushima canned milk, probably $1,000 a kilogram, powdered. And it'll just go on and on and on like that. And you'll see even seeds that have been stored pre-Fukushima offered at a premium.
High valued commodities, yeah.
Correct. Because look at what's happening to the social constructs of the Japanese society now. If you read the Japanese newspapers and you read between the lines, you see there's been a huge change in the social order there. They have adopted at one level, a big chunk of their society has adopted the idea that we shall enforce at a group level absolute acceptance and ignoring of our particular state. Therefore, people that go into stores and try and root out non-radioactive food for their kids are being assaulted verbally and physically because they're not conforming to the social norm. This is very disturbing very disturbing trend.
Oh boy.
Doesn't argue health and long life for the Japanese to not face their condition. Right.
You have the accumulative effect, of course, if we talk about the seafood, fish and stuff like that, like The bigger fish, like tuna, is the worst, obviously, because they accumulate. They eat the smaller fish, who eat the bigger fish, who eat, gets eaten rather by the bigger fish, and eventually have an accumulation of the radiation in some of these, bigger fish like tuna. So it's.
But that's not so much of an issue for us, I don't think. To be quite honest, I don't. As a vegetarian, it's not an issue for me anyway.
Yeah.
But the radioactivity in the sea is likely more of an issue for the Nemo and the space aliens that live in the sea than for us. What's going to kill all of the humans is going to be these ill winds. I've had them in the data since probably 2004 without understanding what I was looking at, and still to the point where I even named them the ill winds and had the radioactive volcano and all of that. In previous Alta reports, and described the situation we're facing now a number of years ago. Even then, I didn't really grasp what we were looking at, and I thought maybe it was going to be as a result of war, not recognizing that the Israelis were going to be, Zionists were going to be part and parcel of the destruction of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant that causes the situation we're in at the moment, right?
Oh, okay. We need to clarify that. Stuxnet and the connection to Israel. Tell us about that.
Stuxnet is an engineered, very complex group virus. It's a computer virus that was engineered by at least 120 people. A big effort, and it was put together by the Zionists, whether it was actually, actually crafted in an Israeli Tel Aviv building, or it was done at Microsoft as immaterial. It was done for the Zionists, by the Zionists, and it was let loose by the Zionists. It's designed to interfere with the Iranian nuclear effort. It's designed to destroy their power plants. The side effect is that the Daiichi power plant and one or two others use the same technology as the Iranians, and so the Stuxnet virus caused the Daiichi power plant in Fukushima to go batshit just at the time that the engineered tsunami hit and the engineered earthquake hit, and it caused a real problem there. Plus, there was this really strange. Unexplained, denied, and the fact that it's denied confirms it in my mind, appearance of a number of Israeli citizens with a device on the roof of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant number 2, I believe, that and the device itself, if you'll go online and look, resembles all kinds of interesting explosive devices for setting off larger explosions. And having gone through the War College with my dad in the 60s at Leavenworth, I'm very familiar with the types of material you need to cause nuclear problems, especially since they had to train everybody in the 60s in the military about Fat Man and Little Boy. That's what they used as their examples, right, to let them all know about all of this. And it's odd that it's or not odd, it's actually fitting, that the technology used to do in the Fukushima Daiichi power plant is very similar to the, in almost a copy of the ignition tube for the Fat Man nuke bomb that was the basic design that we had all through the early 60s. So it's like, proven technology, and they used it to destroy this nuclear power plant. Again, why would any kind of a being do this to our planet? I have no idea. Thus, I'm also thinking there's undoubtedly the hand of the alien agenda crap in this as well. Mm-hmm. But we live in a reality that is not as we've been sold. Our reality is sold to us in one fashion, and it is anything but that. It is so complex that the intrigues of the Medicis and the Borgias over whose bastard son would be the next pope in the Middle Ages is nothing compared to what we're facing here. Harry Seldon in the Foundation trilogy series postulated a very complex empire that spanned 10,000 worlds, and you can imagine the politics that is involved there. And I frequently feel like that's what we're living in at the moment, with all these agendas, sub-agendas, cross-plots, secret wars, and all of that kind of crap going on. But Fukushima was a hit. Whether it was a hit on Japan or whether it was a hit on the West Coast, I don't know. I don't know who benefits from it, but I know who's suffering from it, and that's a lot of us. Our data shows that it's going to get a lot worse. At the moment, there are hints in the current data that I'm just now starting to examine that suggest that the next point of a lot worse is going to be July 10, and that we may find a giant, horrific explosion occurs in or around that period of time. If it does, the issue of radioactivity in our food is moot.
People have speculated another earthquake to hit the already bad situation, the reactor number 4, I believe it is, that this might basically cause it to topple over. Do you think that it would be another earthquake, or are we talking about something else? I mean, again, I actually do want to.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
They could drive a Volkswagen Bug with a half a gallon of gas in the back of it into the reactor, and it would probably do it in. It's very tenuous at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
My data suggests it will occur with some hints in the model space that it'll occur in July, and that this is the beginning of the great harvest of souls that the Mayans talked about. And I can easily believe it. I'm sitting here in a level where my radioactivity is now several thousands of times higher than it was a few years back, less than 10 years back. And so I see with one or two more, and most of this increase in radioactivity is less than a year old. And so I see with one or two more events, the certainty of my death from radiation in 5 years is pretty good. Because within the first month, it was estimated that everybody in Seattle, within the first month of the Fukushima accident in 2011, on March 11, it was estimated that everybody in Seattle had had the opportunity to breathe in at least 15 hot spots. It takes only one to cause a fatal cancer. A certain type of radioactivity in the form of, the heavier element, strontium or, God forbid, plutonium, and you're toast. You're dead within days. You'll be bleeding out. Strontium longer, but plutonium within days. So the certainty of the great death wave is here when Fukushima goes. The data I have, the forecast, which admittedly I'm wrong a lot, but you got to give me credit where credit's due. Occasionally I get things, blondes on boats, right? That was just an out of the blue kind of should not have occurred, stellar example. So that when we're right, we really are right. And maybe I'm right again. And if that's the case, it'll be July 10th. So if anybody is looking for a deadline to, beat feet below the equator to get a few more months of life out of the, here, then my way of thinking is you'll know by July 10th how long you've got. If there's a big explosion on July 10th, you have probably less than 30 days to get south of the equator.
Now, go ahead. Go ahead, finish that point, Cliff.
Oh, I was going to say the issue again is that it takes 30 days for the gas clouds to hit the U.S., and then it'll take an additional total of 18 weeks for it to permeate the northern hemisphere.
Great news. Yeah. Well, obviously, I want to talk about some of your suggestions for a possible fix on this. I know you don't answer whys and all that, but I just have to mention it. What is going on with the international community, if you will, on this question? Why aren't the best minds in the world working on fixing this thing once and for all and actually try to do something about it? Is there any level of...
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of hints in our data that it's not healthy to do so. Two people recently, and I won't say who because I don't want to get into that, and you can find them if you want to go look, but two people with nuclear expertise that have had really good suggestions have perished. One in a car wreck at 46 miles an hour, and it looked like it was doing 130. I don't know what they hit that thing with, but it just flattened it. And another individual that died in a small plane crash. I don't like small planes. They're too easy to bugger over. So people are indeed doing that. And here's the thing. Those individuals that, let me put in a little bit of an interesting wrinkle here, okay? And it'll lead into our next subject. A bear, and my number is probably wrong, okay, but within a general sense, about a half an hour's drive or about, say, 40 kilometers to the south, west of, the Daiichi power plant was the single laboratory in Japan that I've been told, by the way, as an aside, was one of the power plant's primary customers for electricity. But this single laboratory was Japan's only time lab.
Now, can you say who mentioned that to you? Source? No. Okay.
This time lab is, as I've been told, I've been given, I have contacts with some Chinese people that were smart enough to recognize that it's unhealthy to be a billionaire and Chinese descent and in China. And because they have a lot of money, they know things. And this guy owes me some knowledge because I've shared mine with him and he's benefited. And we're good buddies. He's in his late 70s now, and so he doesn't care much. He knows he's going to be dying soon. But anyway, he's telling me some stuff, and he told me about the time lab and their primary contracts and all this kind of stuff, and how curious it was that they were on an expected threshold path is how he put it prior to the Fukushima disaster. And that all the scientists that were there recognized that something was up, and they basically all disappeared off the planet. And he knows where 2 of them went, and he wouldn't say, but I think I know, but I won't say. But they basically figured that they were part of the hit, and they took off. And so there were about 7 real top individuals there that you just can't find on this planet anymore. And curiously, you can't find or get hold of or get information to Dr. Andersson anymore either.
That's right. Have you any idea what happened there? I mean, we tried to contact him a while back. I don't know if his website is even down right now, I think. I have no idea.
I've tried various different approaches, and those people that have been kind enough to help me out have also tried various approaches. And the only time I was even, what I want to say is close to successful, I ran into a very hard wall. So I don't know what's going on. But he actually has what I think could be a potential to save our ass, okay? And my idea is half-baked and so on, but it has a good basis in the understanding of how time operates, and as he would validate. And basically my idea is to take these closed time-like loops, his little time bubbles, and to create 3 of them, one inside another, like those little Russian dolls. And the internal one would be the one that would be the power plant for the middle one, and the outer one would be to protect us against the effects. And by doing this duality in a triple fashion, we would be able to concentrate the stuff of time, that aspect of the reality that comes in, and so concentrate the aspect of time and maybe get like 10,000 years worth of disintegration within, a year, 6 months or so. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be a tricky thing to accomplish. But if I'm correct, and he would have to validate this because I don't have any actual experimental knowledge to go on. I only have the mathematics that has been shared with me by some friends. But if I'm correct, in the process of creating the bubble within the bubble approach and using this generator on the inside to power it, in fact, a sphere will be created that will fundamentally shear the realities. It will separate the reality in all directions from the center of it in a radial fashion, and so we could set it up to literally come down and be a sphere that would encapsulate Fukushima. And we'd have to get it close enough and make it big enough that it would scoop out underneath Fukushima and it would isolate it. Everything that was within there would be dead. I'm talking plants, everything would be dead. And I'm unsure of what would happen when we popped that bubble, because it would be a huge dead zone of an incredible level, because of what we would do to it. But no radiation would get out, and all the radiation would decay in a shorter period of time. And then once we'd had it encapsulated, we could sit around and argue and figure the math of what would happen when we opened it up, try some experiments. Because it's really freaky, because see, here's some of the things that you get into. It's really odd. Okay, so I've got some watercress, and I've got Papa watercress and Mama watercress, 2 different strains of watercress. I cross the watercress, and I produce baby watercress. Baby watercress has a generational seed. I get seeds from that. I take it to seed. I get those seeds. I then take Papa watercress, who still exists because of the nature of the cress plant. You can keep it going. And I take Papa watercress and I put him into a time bubble. And I deprive him of time, or I give him too much time, and basically send him back in time, if you will, so that he doesn't exist anymore. Okay? His DNA is wiped out. It never existed in time. Yet, baby watercress doesn't disappear. Baby watercress is still here. But, curiously, as soon as we pop the time bubble in which Papa watercress has reverted back to non-existence, the DNA of baby watercress changes.
How does it change? How does it change?
The easiest way for me to explain it is the following. I can tell you which particular parts of the DNA are affected, which sugars, which polysaccharides, but that doesn't answer the real question. You want to know what's the causal factor, right? Okay, and it's because we've all been wrong about going back and killing your grandfather in time, kind of thing, that we get this wrong. You can go back and kill your grandfather, that's just fine, and you'll come back and you'll be just fine. And it's because of what I've termed the EPN, or ever present now, and its relationship to omni-consciousness. Okay, And so let me put it to you this way. We're standing vibrational waves. The watercress is merely energy that's vibrating in such a way that we perceive it as watercress. But it's the same kind of energy that we are. The same atoms, the same universal consciousness animates its atoms as animates the atoms in my body and separates its atoms from the air the same way that universal consciousness separates the arm hairs that I've got from the air so that I don't drag that air along with me. That level of universal consciousness has an existence that's tied to the ever-present now. When they destroyed the Papa watercress, the component of his DNA that ties his EPN to the EPN of his child, baby watercress, that little tiny bit of the DNA is gone. So from that viewpoint, baby watercress is a true orphan in a way we've never seen before. It is actually lacking a constituent component of the EPN addressing of the standing waves that are all of the energy within materium. This is a very disturbing idea in many ways, and I have just started to noodle on it, and it's scared me already to the point where I would rather go out and build my boat.
Now, we didn't get an opportunity to interview Dr. David Andersson before he disappeared off the map, basically, and I don't know how well versed you are in his material, his stuff, but if we just go back to some of the basics here, how would this be done? What is the mechanics involved for us to actually physically do this that you're talking about the bubbles?
Sure.
Yeah.
The bubbles are magnets. They're just magnetic fields. We're getting very astute with our crude abilities to control magnetic fields. And we find that if you spin magnets one way, you get this kind of field. And if you spin all these magnets together in different ways, you get these other fields. The Russians and Chinese are doing great work with what are called tokamaks, which are magnetic fields that are used to contain high energy reactions, which, for instance, I could create a magnetic field that would allow me to weld inside it, and none of the welding radiation would get out. I don't know if you're a welder, but if you ever weld without your mask, you get that welder sunburn, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that kind of thing is being done routinely now in commercial applications. And real soon we'll see them on local welders being offered around the planet as soon as the Chinese tumble to how to do it on these.
And you say that that's actually a manipulation of time, then, to a certain extent.
No. That is a manipulation of the magnetic fields. That's an example of a strong magnetic field dampening radiation at a level that you could perceive, right? Welders that you would not need the full shield, you'd only need eye shielding for. They would emit light, but no other radiation that would hurt, and the heat doesn't really come out. Those are going to be available relatively soon. That's a strong magnetic field application. Now, a stronger magnetic field application is where they make magnetic fields that are so strong that the stuff that is time can't get through. Now, everybody thinks of time as an integral part of reality and that we're all in this river and we can't get out of it, and nothing could be further from the truth. I have used that example myself to describe time, and it is inaccurate. It is basically as though we are here continuously, always present, and we are being irradiated by sunlight, but at the same time we're also being irradiated by time particles. And Einstein got to some of this when he did his E equals MC squared stuff, and you start getting, if you convert everything over to joules and actually start dealing with the math, you can perceive how some of the time stuff actually works. And basically, it's an aspect of reality. Now, the Hindus understood it a different way, and they just simply said that time was one of the 66,000 aspects that composed the reality compose the illusion that we all think of as reality. And they're quite correct about that. If you think of time as merely a form of radiation bombarding you, then it makes sense that you could develop a radiation shield that would prevent that radiation from getting through. The harder thing to wrap your head around is how you would tweak that shield to concentrate and focus like a lens and gather more time stuff and shove it into the middle. That's what I'm proposing.
Now, are you talking about tachyons, stuff like this?
No, because that's a grosser form of the energy. We cannot measure the time material even remotely, and we don't even have a lexicon, most of us, that encompasses the level of nuance that is required to discuss time not as a particle, but as it is. So, for instance, we don't measure time. We measure the transit of a photon perceived from one point to its perception on another point. We're measuring our own perception, then, not really time.
Meaning, without light, we wouldn't see anything moving. Hence, we couldn't measure anything. Is that the kind of logic there? Yeah.
Okay, and then it gets even worse. Okay, because from my viewpoint, we're all vibrating here at 44,000 times a second, 22,000 times a second, or 44 trillion times a second. 22 trillion times a second, we vibrate into existence, and 22 trillion times a second, we vibrate out of existence. This is the idea of reality. It's this continuous creation-destruction mode, and it could not be otherwise.
Is this sorry to interrupt, the clock cycle of creation, or the existence? Is that what you're talking about? Clock cycle as in computer, meaning you have
No. It's sort of like that. But that clock cycle is a pulse through material that actually continues to exist, right? Okay, so I'm a computer guy. I understand about the clock cycle, the primary cycle, the zero ring, and so on. Mm-hmm. And what actually happens is that you've got hardware there that gets a pulse. So the hardware is just sitting there, and a pulse comes through at a particular kind of a time. What I'm talking about has a subtler degree of nuance to it that goes all the way into what we think of as spirituality, because here's the sense of it. We have a pulse every 22 trillion times a second that actually creates us. It would be as though the computer created itself 250, if it was at 250 hertz, on a 250 hertz cycle, it would create itself in front of your eyes 250 times, and it would destroy itself 250 times every single second. And you would see this occur as you're typing. Now, you can't see that fast, so say it occurred at 30 times a second. You could still type on it. It would still be there. Mm-hmm. Every time you pushed your finger down, the odds would be that you'd actually hit something. But you could actually perceive it because your brain actually is able to perceive things at 30 frames a second. Now, it can't perceive its own creation at 22 trillion times a second. The closer you get to that level of perception through the practices of meditation, etc., the more you are on the enlightenment trail, and you're upshifting, if you will, within the vibrational state that we call reality. And this is just my view of it.
That's an incredible frame rate, and you do need some advanced hardware to have that kind of cycling of it, of course. But
okay.
What is this? Where does that number come from, by the way? Why 22 trillion? Is this just
No, it's not just out of the air. It's really goofy. But if you meditate, and we're not talking contemplation, we're not talking mantra repetition, we're not talking even vipassana, which is insight meditation. We're talking the stuff that's more akin to Chan, Zen, Nikung, the silent, no words meditation, the actual grasping of reality, the entering of the void. Right. You have the opportunity to do this thing that's called entering the stream. Some people are born, if you read in the Science of Yoga, it actually says explicitly that some people, because of karma, will be born into this life with the ability to do things. They have special powers. They're more psychic than others. They can do things. Some people are actually able to be born into this life, and they just know shit. You know, they can touch a tree and they know how the tree is doing, right? They touch your hand and they say, oh, boy, I'm sorry about the ache in your elbow. You know, and how the hell did they know, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, they're operating at that particular level. They're operating at another vibrational level, if you will. Now, if you enter the stream, if you meditate, there are no words, but there is knowledge. It is possible to bring knowledge back. One time when I was meditating, I was able to bring back Avogadro's number. Avogadro's this weird guy who sat around and thought about atoms and reality a lot, and speculated on the number of atoms of gas that could appear in a given volume in a given period of time in a given state of that volume. And if you go into Avogadro's number and you look for it and you dig all the way down into ionized hydrogen, you find out that he's got something there that leads you to believe that the frame rate for creation is 22 trillion times a second. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I have since been validated by this because I've had some thinking about this. If it is close to 22 trillion, and I don't give a damn. If you want to tell me it's 46 trillion, I'm quite happy to shake your hand and eat your pie, and I'll believe 46 trillion because I don't care. All right, the number is immaterial. That's a monkey mind thing. But here's the deal. Just to validate the concept, I started thinking, if that's the case, if the frame rate is that high, then there are certain defined limits that I believe would be in existence. And so therefore, one of the defined limits is that humanity, with all of our instrumentation, should not be able to read higher than 1/3 of an order of magnitude of that frame rate. Okay, so my postulate, and I won't go into why I have that postulate unless you really want to, and that's a whole nother hour. But I have this postulate that we would never be able to develop a scientific apparatus that would be able to read faster in hardware than 1/3 of one reduced order of magnitude of that frame rate. So therefore, we'd never be able to read faster than about 9.5 billion clicks a second, if you will. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I looked all through everything in literature, sent my spiders out, and I found it. NASA recorded a pulsar, and they used the most significant thing they could find in the way of analysis, and they were actually able to count the thing spinning at 8 billion frames a second.
Jeez.
Okay, so is 1.5 billion less than my anticipated maximum, but hey, we're getting there, right?
What does that mean? There's like is that a creation point? Is that a source point for something then, or what the hell is that?
Speculation. So you're asking basically a why question.
Yeah.
And I can speculate. I know.
Can't avoid this.
I'm annoying to talk to. I'm just so annoying. You would not believe poor wife, the suffering she goes through just living with me. But for whatever reason, it's her karma. That's what I tell her. But in any event, so here's the thing. There is indeed a threshold there, because at the level of 9.5, and this is my way of thinking, 9.5 billion pulses per second is going to cross the threshold at which our ability to measure the electromagnetic spectrum ends. And it'll still exist, but it won't be we won't have anything in reality and hardware to measure it. We can measure it probably with a concentrated form of consciousness. But you see what I'm saying, right? It's got to be, we've entered into the realm where the only thing we could measure it with would be directed energy, because we're at an energetic level that's so, fast and intense, it exceeds the ability of hardware to recognize itself.
Yep.
This is actually my basic dispute with all those people running around with that bullshit about giant AI machines running around doing stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, as long as we're ranting and raving on people, might as well rag on them for a bit. Got a bunch of people out there with this story that, the whole world's controlled by these giant AI computers, right?
Yeah.
I've worked in the computer industry. I worked so long ago that my first computer was a K Pro 2, and it had 4K of RAM, and I operated off of CPM, and I was just thrilled to upgrade to the original version of DOS before Bill Gates bought it from Seattle Computing. So I've been in it for a long damn time. And AI requires something that most people just gloss over. You cannot have consciousness. You can't have artificial intelligence without consciousness, right? Everybody assumes, you look at all these movies, Forbes Project, HAL, any of these things. The being that the human is interacting with is conscious. It is making its own decisions, right?
Right.
You would agree?
Yep.
Okay. A prerequisite of consciousness is emotion in a body. Now, the reason that I say this is that we have rocks that have a certain kind of consciousness. We have trees that have consciousness, but we don't have artificial intelligence levels available in them, and never will, nor will we in any of the hardware, until we can give that hardware the ability to suffer and to feel pleasure and pain. Then I could say, I grant you that this thing is on its way to becoming a being, because it will have the level of predictive ability about its own nature that will allow it to become conscious. So, for instance, if you stab an earthworm with a pin and cause it pain, it will react. But it's not going to predict that it's likely to be stabbed again. Nor will a machine. You can zap a machine with a burst of electricity, and it has no reason to believe that would ever occur again. It is only at the point that we start using our minds to predict and feel our way through reality that we become conscious. And that consciousness leads us to intelligence, because we start learning things or not. If you don't succeed very well, you don't contribute to the gene pool, and you're out of there.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so go ahead, finish the thought.
Computers, we can wire sensors into them. They can read and respond various different types of electrical signals, but they don't in any way internalize, accept those electrical signals as part of themselves. They are not self-aware. As a software engineer, I can tell you right now, it's like an island. All computers. If it isn't there, if you don't bring it with you, it isn't there. It's not going to create itself. Computers are not creative beings, and without the ability to do creation, you have no art, you have no intelligence.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that if there is such a thing as being close to an artificial intelligence, it would be a faulty one. It would be a sick one, if you know what I mean. I mean, for instance,
it would also be constrained to the software that creates it.
Of course.
When I wrote software that was the operating system, if I didn't put it into that software, it wasn't going to happen.
Be there. No,
you know what? I was so thrilled to discover Prolog. Prolog is a really cool program because programming and logic is what it's actually all about. And Prolog has this unique ability among software languages because you can write a program that when it encounters new information can stop and recompile itself and then start itself up again and get going.
Right.
With that new information in it. And even that is extremely limited.
And that was one of the argumentation points, I think, by Kurzweil or one of the other transhumanists, that they suggest that the software itself should be able to rewrite itself, to improve itself, basically, right? So, but you're saying that wouldn't work.
My argument is it can never improve itself. That's a judgment call. And therefore you're going back to the human, the software engineer that said this is good for you to absorb and this is bad for you to absorb. Therefore, it's not in control of its own destiny. It's not actually doing its own thing. It's doing what it has been constrained to do by the software engineer. Mm-hmm. And it can never exceed that.
What do you make of a thing like the Blue Brain project, if you heard about that, to basically create, a synthetic brain? It's the whole...
That I think would work. Because it's beyond your control. Just the way the neural net programs initially offered us the prospect for an artificial intelligence-like structure. Just like Andersson does not deal with time, he deals with closed time-like loops. The neural network approach to things was actually a artificial intelligence-like operating system approach. It had some attempt or some potential because it had the ability to have things happen that were outside the original constraints of the programmers. Now, neural network, you don't write the software. You just write little tiny nodes, and then you make millions of them and see what happens when you put them all together. Mm-hmm, but again, even so, none of those little nodes can ever expand themselves enough to accept new information. If you didn't build that little node to accept that particular kind of information, it's never going to see it, and it's never going to respond to it, can never grow that way, therefore it can never be artificially intelligent.
And what this is showing, of course, is also that we inherently, with the scientists that are doing this kind of stuff, has a limited awareness and knowledge of what a human being is. They think that they can just recreate the neural network, and hence life will appear, spontaneously within there.
I bet you also, as a rule, you can probably say that most of the academics and most of the people involved in those attempts, and most of the military minds that are involved in the artificial intelligence world, and most of the compartmentalized military minds and scientific minds, I bet you none of those bastards were psychedelic users. Well, and probably none of them ever did any entheogens of any kind, and they probably have a really sketchy relationship with their own bodies.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. But some of them do, though. I mean, if you look at some of the tech industry in a way, I mean, people like, well, we know about everyone from Bill Gates up to Steve Jobs, of course, but many of the people who were involved in designing the computers and coming up with many of the things we're using today, they were heavily involved in some of the psychedelic
which allows
area
them to recognize some things correct.
Yeah.
The people that are all in the compartmentalized areas are just are a different mindset, and they're very much like the neural net. They're never going to stumble to any of these ideas. To a certain extent, I don't know Andersson. I don't know him at all, but I'd be willing to bet he's not going to think about it the same way I am. He's not going to tumble to the idea of the EPN and what's going on relative to the genetics involved in that, because he won't look at it from this particular viewpoint, probably because he doesn't meditate and go into the stream. So, and I never would have stumbled to it unless I'd taken all that acid when I was a kid.
And what about an alien artificial intelligence, not man-made, but coming from somewhere else?
Okay, now that I don't call an artificial intelligence. That I call a construct, or you can call them an accumulation or an aggregation. I got a friend of mine that calls them a thick syrupy mass. And that exists, okay? I'm quite convinced that this being that has no vowels, okay, in its name, that the early purveyors of perfidy that we call religion, that adopted a religion they called Judaism, fell under its sway. And that is a construct being. That is not a god. That is a very powerful being that has absorbed personalities and consciousness and floated around quite a bit on the energetic stream, operates at a vibrational level that we cannot perceive, but it is able to exert its influence down at our vibrational level. And it is a very nasty, ugly thing. It is not an organic creature as I am able to determine. Again, all of this is my impression and tempered by my poor, twisted, warped human mind and all the shit I've been through. And the best I can do is to tell you that out on the stream, this thing whose name begins with a Y and who has no vowels in its name, is cold, it is hard, it has captured many organic beings within its nature, like the Borg. It's very much like the Borg cube, right?
That's right.
Okay, and maybe that's why they put that in those movies. Maybe that's what they're telling us. But it's in some ways it's very much like that. But the beings within this construct being are suffering. They know they've been captured. And yet they are unable to free themselves. And it's really weird, okay? You run into people like Carlos Castaneda, you run into people when you're a kid, and you run into these the Brujo and the Kirandaos, these guys that are native fellows, the shaman, and they'll tell you, oh, kid, there's like 7 plants, don't take any, like the pusher man, don't take anything that isn't plant-based. If you take these drugs, you've got to do it right. You've got to treat it with respect. You've got to be righteous. You've got to understand the rituals involved. And you've also got to understand the nature of the reality in which you're heading, and that there are evil or threatening beings over there. And so there are some beings out on the stream you don't want to go and poke. And this thing with the Y, that being with a name that has no vowels, you don't want to go and poke it. It's very nasty.
Is it still here? Is he?
Oh yeah.
It's hanging around.
Yeah. This is really weird. Okay, from my perspective, looking at things on the computer at the data level, we've had a huge shift in the change of language. We've gone into release language. The shift in the release language was concurrent with a shift in the stream. The stream had changed energetically, perhaps maybe 18, 19 months ago, something like that, taking a big uptick in energy levels prior to the Fukushima thing. I can't relate anything that happens to the stream directly correlating it to reality. There's no point. Again, it would all be speculation. However, the shift into release language has caused a disturbance, or no, it hasn't. Let me rephrase that. The shift in release language is concurrent with a change that I describe as a disturbance within the stream. Okay. This shift in release language came in these last couple of months. We hit it in March, and now we're into just permanent release language. And here's I can tell, there's no longer any building tension language. The media are failing. They'll drop off to nothing by the end of this year. No one will even look at, probably, I don't even think we'll have CNN by the end of the year. Things are going to happen that rapidly as we move forward. But a lot of the things that are occurring here appear to be correlated to the disturbance that's occurring in the stream. And some of the disturbances in the stream are allowing vibrational emanations to come off of the other beings that are also out in the stream, and some of them don't like it much. That's, again, my impression. I'm out in the stream. There's no words. You have to understand what you do is you go park your consciousness when you're doing these kinds of meditation. In my particular case, I discovered the place where I can shut off the linguistic center of my mind by placing my consciousness in a particular place forward and down relative to the linguistic center within its normal relationship. And when I do that, I can then go into the stream because there's no words. There isn't that continuous dialectic that is part of the ever-present now. You ever wonder why that word stream doesn't shut off in your head except for when you go to sleep?
Well, seriously, that's a good point. Yeah,
internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Most people don't discuss that, but I've often wondered about it. Why doesn't it? Why can't I shut it off? Mm-hmm. And many people say, well, I've been able to shut it off, but anytime I do that, then my head is filled with a song that I just can't get out, or something along these lines, right? Repetition. And this is the basis of the OCD, and it's people identifying with that pulse from the stream, the EPN that we've got to have to maintain our state. When you go off and you do your consciousness raising, and you go through the death and destruction that's caused through the psychedelic drugs, one of the effects of taking a psychedelic drug is in that first peak period, you think you're going to die. You're absolutely sure you're never, ever going to come back from it. Your body's dissolving. It's in 100 million pieces flying all over the place, and you don't know what's going on. Over time, you realize you're not going to die, and you repeat the experience. But the death component of that allows you to see things at a different frequency level. And it is that same kind of experience that you'll tumble to later on if you give up the drugs and go into meditation heavily, and you'll discover that it's all vibration. I had a particular, let's say, extra added push because I invented this software called Vortex that allowed me to read from computer screens very fast by having the computer do all of the reading for me and displaying all of the words. And it did it by displaying them very fast. So I trained my eyes to see things that are flashing at 2,000 words or 2,000 frame rates per second. Now, I don't think I actually see that level in terms of a conscious level.
But you perceive it on the...
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so that level of vibrational training, if you will, has been translated over to the stream. So when you go into the stream and you perceive other beings there, whether they're human or dogs or whatever the hell, I don't know, they're just there, and they are vibrating the same way you are vibrating. And there are subtleties within the level of surface vibration on these beings, because bear in mind, this is, to all intents and purposes, a three-dimensional representation to your mind. And there are these vibrational things that, if you will, occur. And the vibrations that are occurring to the being that has no vowels in his name, I'm not perceiving them as good. It's a very unique or distinct change from when I entered the stream, which was way back in 97 or 98. Bear in mind, the first time I fell into the stream, and then in the first year or two, I discovered this being that was there. I just thought it was, part of the wall, so to speak, right? And it took me a long time to learn enough to be able to discriminate. But there's parts of the wall at the time, if you will, that I would poke mentally, and they would poke back really hard, so you wouldn't want to do that. And then I discovered, oh, okay, I understand what's going on, and I tumbled to the idea of how the 22 trillion times a second works, and that there's other vibrational levels, and of course we're all hamstrung by the fact that we're trying to perceive reality through these really limited senses. And the reason you have the limited senses is entirely because of the brainwashing that you've been under, and because they've eliminated all the shaman from the planet. Bear in mind how the shaman used to work, right? You'd be a guy, it doesn't matter what race you are, you're tribal. You're out there existing on the planet back in those days, before the organization, before this construct being showed up. And there was also something else out in the stream, and I don't know, maybe it's another one of these constructs that's battling with it. But in any event, before all this crap happened, our lives as beings centered around a different interaction with the energetic universe around us. And so the approach to dealing with reality had to do with us creating a common consensus reality. And we still see hints of that and let's look at a movie that came out about your people, okay? The Swedish guys, right? The Vikings and all of that. There's this weird movie, has Antonio Banderas in it, The 13th Warrior, I think it's called.
That's right. He learns the language there and stuff pretty quick.
Right. He teaches himself, okay, linguistic. That's why I tumbled into it. I love that character. He was, and he came to love the Vikings, right? At first he's repulsed by them, but then he came to love them. Now, there's a key thing in there that most people are not going to tumble to, and that is the shaping of the consensus reality. That storyline centers on this. In the beginning of it, you find the Arab is hanging out with the Vikings, and they're all in a camp, and he's thinking, ooh, why am I with all these crude people? They don't know anything. They're not refined. I've got silks. I know what I'm doing, And then the next morning, this little kid shows up with a Viking boat, and he stands out there and just stands there. And the Antonio, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, Antonio Banderas says to his translator, hey, what's up? Why is that guy just standing there? Why didn't he come on up here? And his translator, who's the guy who speaks, the common language of Latin, tries to get the idea across to Antonio that there is a different world that exists in the North, and that the common consensus reality is not created the same way it is within the Arab world. That part of the movie is probably missed by most of the people on the planet who see this.
I didn't recall that. That's fascinating. I would want to rewatch that again. Go ahead, Cliff.
Okay, and it has to do with my, like I say, my twisted, warped way of looking at the world and language. Okay, right. And it's the beauty of the language that was involved there, trying to describe this very ephemeral and ethereal nature of human consciousness, where the author or whoever it was that stuck that particular scene in really reached in terms of being a human, because they were trying to say, here is a culture, here are humans that we don't understand from the Arab perspective, that are so strange that they don't know that kid is a real human kid until they've formed a common collective consensus that he's a real human kid. And until then, hey, it's open. It's up for grabs. He might turn out to be, a dragon. He might turn out to be something that we don't want. And we've got to really examine this. And so he is doing the righteous thing of standing there and allowing himself to be absorbed into their common collective consensus. Makes sense?
So this is a fascinating idea, one that I've been, intrigued by for a while, not being limited by, well, I would call it the belief system as well. That when we shape as you said, the consensus reality, a lot of the things that we hear about from the ancient world, potentially makes more sense that there was actually a time where there were magic, if you will, out there, and there were different types of beings, so
right,
yeah.
It still exists, we're just blind to it.
Yeah, we don't see it.
That's the strange part of it.
Yeah.
And you're quite correct. I don't know if you'll recall, but if you'll go back and listen, I'm willing to make a bet of I'll cook you any pie I can make, that in our previous discussion I made the comment that I personally, Cliff, does not hold to a belief system, because the word belief means I wish this to be true. And it obviously is self-blinding. So what I want is to understand and perceive as it exists. So I don't want a belief system. And the minute someone comes on up and says, and I really hate that word, and our language is so mind controlling, and that's why the media is so good at it, and really studies it. And if you look at the language and so on, that basically was why I'm a linguist, because being a software engineer, you deal with language at a level where you actually make things happen from your words.
Yes.
It's very powerful. It's very magical.
Yeah.
And it is magic at a level that our ancestors would perceive that way. You give a word to a machine and it does stuff. Wow. You tell the car to turn on and it does. You couldn't believe the reaction. So at that level, I started really looking at language and its effect on us, and try and control your own language. For my entire life, I've struggled with my own language, because I was shoved around from culture to culture to culture to culture, and I would bring around with me language patterns that would get the shit beat out of me.
Yeah.
So, as a kid, right? You're always the newbie, and then if you were not careful about the language, so you learned as a kid, as a military brat, you learned to be very adaptive, to pick up the speech patterns and learn whatever was the local language, so you could blend in and avoid that pummeling. And
Yeah.
It was a very good way to learn. And it was a very, I lived in my formative years in Europe in a post-war collection that was a stew of languages. I was in a high school that I think there were 97 different languages in that high school. Exactly. Russian, Czech, Slovak, Swede, Norway, Danish, just everything. Because they just shoved all the, the dependents kids into one school to corral them all. This is before they really got set up with the American military's dependent structure throughout Europe. In any event, though, language and its effect on humans, we can't disregard. And that getting us way back to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
That's why, I'm going along, and one of my spiders bring me back this curious bit of language about something I'm concerned with, and the next thing you know, I'm in a fight with Ben Fulford.
This is a very important point, though, and obviously in a little bit here we'll begin to round off, and I want to try it back a little bit more to Fukushima. I still have one question there to ask you, but sure. It's interesting to think about why we think in a language, even why our internal dialogue is in a specific language. It's very strange. And when you begin to realize that the homogenization of the language, even within a country, has also taken place. I remember back in I don't remember it personally, but I've been reading about it back in the 50s, probably after, the World War II there, even in Sweden here, and it happened in other countries as well. They began to, create a consensus Swedish language. There were tons of different dialects with different interpretations, different types of words, even for different things. But it's all been limited all the time. We've gone from a pretty broad language base to less and less and less. And it goes back to 1984 again, right? The destruction of words, because that's also the destruction of what and how you are able to think as a human being.
Correct.
Very important.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why I love this guy, Mario Bilingo, or Biglino. Because he's such a specific word fanatic that he says, okay, this word means this, but hey, it also means this to these people over here and this to these people over there.
Right. Yeah.
And you need to know that, because, for instance, we've got people that are friends of ours that are, actually I can't go into that. Betrays their confidence, but, here's another example. The one thing that he actually talks about, the word that the entire Christian domination world, fueled by the Judeo understanding that also permeates Islam, the word that everybody on the planet translates as Holy Spirit, is actually a word in Hebrew that, of course, Hebrew didn't exist at the time the Bible was written, or any of the stuff that supposedly happened in the Bible existed. Hebrew is a made-up language, okay? But the Hebrew word, which is our source for all of this, that word means spaceship.
Really?
Spirit.
Okay.
The word,
Mhm.
R-A-U-C-H in Hebrew, means thing that hovers over water like a predator bird not moving its wings, and it ain't a bird. As they put it in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it hovers over water like a brick doesn't. And the word, Rauch, is the word for spirit that we all take into spirit, but it actually is the word for wind. And if you get into the translation of this, and this is all why I'm a linguist, because when we lose words and lose meaning, someone's controlling us again, right?
Yeah.
Someone's trying to shovel our thoughts down a particular way. Now, there is one exception to that. That's when you lose all words. When you get to the point where your skill is such in personal meditation that you can park your consciousness and shut off your internal dialogue, an entirely different view of reality opens up. And you can shut off your dialogue. You need not have that kind of connection to the ever-present now. And when you do that, the ever-present now exposes itself in what I call the stream, what Buddha also called the stream. And it's just convenient to use his terminology because the Buddhists were really fanatic about thinking about this and exploring it all. And so you can think of the pulse that comes out of the middle of the, or it comes out of the edges of all of the materium, goes right to the middle of the materium, and because this pulse moves beyond time, and in fact creates time, it's beyond time. And so this pulse happens 22 trillion times a second, and it stops 22 trillion times a second. And as it stops, all of your atoms dissolve, your whole vibrational state dissolves, but that allows you to move. And that whole vibrational frequency thing is exposed at a higher level to our brains, which, bear in mind, only operate at 40 frames a second, when we are able to stop the linguistic center. But something occurred. Now, there's this guy, I think you may have actually interviewed him, that had the book about the origin of the bicameral brain.
Yeah, sure. There was one of the caretakers of that. I mean, we had Marcel Kujestein on the program.
That was it.
And he spoke for James, Julian James, right? So
there you go. There you go. I'm terrible. I can never remember people's names because I moved all around the planet and I know too many people. So it just flies out. But I remember content. That was some damn fine content because that was some really good thinking. So at some point, something occurred to us as a species that was relatively recent, probably did not involve our DNA directly being manipulated because that was, a long time ago. But something occurred at an energetic level that caused this connection between our consciousness within our brains and our minds and the ever-present now, and thus sprang up the internal dialogue, your constant brain chatter, monkey mind. Okay, and when you remove monkey mind, which is the whole goal of the yogic arts, and if you go and you listen to Tsarian, you can interpret the arising of the monkey mind as the imposition of all that mind control, because Tsarian is also of the opinion that the yogic arts, which include Taoism, are an attempt to get us beyond this level of destructive behavior that's being imposed on us energetically. Make sense? Did I say that right?
Throw out the Hanuman, as it were. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Okay, so if you chuck the monkey mind and you close down that vibrational level that's always occupying all of your energy and sucking down your calories and your blood and everything just to keep this chatter going, which is useless and meaningless and provides you with no real information about the planet or anything that is useful to you, and is actually really a conduit for the ego and distraction and get you into trouble and all of this kind of stuff. If you can shut that down, you also discover as a side effect an exposure to reality that offers new opportunities for us as a species, new ways to cooperate, new ways to think about things. It changes you in ways that I could not have perceived when I first began this journey back when I was age 11, got hooked on a stolen book about yoga that I stole from a bunch of Nazis. And read in there, the first thing it said, was that Master so-and-so says, beware, if you follow the practices beyond this paragraph, you will be changed at a personality level. And you need to know this. And damned if the bastard wasn't right. So those kind of things do offer the approach for us for being able to do things, measurements, for instance, being able to measure beyond the 8 trillion times a second, but we won't do it with machinery. Being able to get beyond the powers that be by controlling ourselves at a consciousness level. It is more than platitudes. It is more than empty words. It is a statement that can't be really felt or perceived until you've started on that path. But once you get to the understanding that you're on that enlightenment path and you're not going to give it up, you can't be defeated. You can't be killed. You can be destroyed and your body's gone, but that spirit's going to keep on going. Next time you come back, you're going to pick it up again. And they know this, you know, and it's like, that's why they leave people like Ike alone. They don't want to martyr him. They don't want him coming back in another form. You know, and it's going to get that way. Now, our data stuff is a little bit different. When the release language changed, and this is for the people that care about how our procedures go, I'll just go into that real briefly here.
Sure.
I ran into, for years now, since about 2003, I've been running into this thing that I call the data gap. And because I couldn't quite understand it, I called it a gap. It looked like a gap to me. And now I understand that it's not really a gap. What it is a flood, and a change in the way in which people are using the internet and the language they're expressing, such that our data separation into immediacy values, short-term values, and longer-term values has now been destroyed, such that immediacy values are overwhelming everything. Now, in our processing, we have usually used the short-term values to set the archetype, the immediacy values to provide the detail, and the longer-term values to provide the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of support for the detail in terms of how we organize our structure. Once we got waylaid by being flooded out by immediacy values, which blindsided me. I didn't see coming. I actually thought internet would be shut down. When we first started seeing the Arab Spring and they started shutting down the internet, I said to myself, aha, that's it. That's the cause of the data gap. You know, they're going to take the whole internet down and so on. Well, in fact, they're not doing that. And in fact, I still have the same level of processing that still impacted me every bit as bad as having the internet taken down. And that is this change in the language to release language being continuous. And also coincident with that is this uprush in immediacy language. Now, for those that don't know, the immediacy language is effective from 2 to about 3 weeks out to the end of the third week. So my problem is, I've got lots of detail. I got tons of psychic impressions pouring in. But my problem is that most of them are happening before I could get them written up and posted. And also, without the shorter term data, I have very few points upon which to hang the details. In other words, we get a bit of detail that shows an orange sphere associated with the name Fred, associated with a container, and we get data about that in a hanging position that's threatening. But no damn archetype about anything. So we don't have a clue as to what it means, right?
Yeah.
But it was a particularly bright data point within model space. And so we have tons of these details, which once we, in the previous processing, we would use the shorter term data to set all the archetypes because the detail levels naturally seem to flow into that. It is as though there was going to be, it's basically the flow of language. We have a story that breaks here, and 75 years later, we're still discussing it. That's the Hindenburg. But we're not discussing it in the same terms that we were using at the time that it occurred 75 years ago. Right. But we will still occasionally, with our longer range view, use some of those high intensity words, and we will, with a different meaning and a different level of intensity, we will say the phrase, the humanity, the way they did back then, but without that emotional intensity that came across then. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so that's how we separate language, and that's really the flow of it in reality. It takes 75 years for some levels of language to be said about an event. And so if we'd done the forecast for the Hindenburg, we would have to wait to 75 years for all of that long-term language to play out. And that's why we'll call a hit when I have like 18% of the language in 5 groups within the first 4 months, because I'm not going to wait 30 years for it to reach 90% or something. Anyway, our language changed. The rate of propagation of the immediacy values changed, and we find ourselves in this particular flood of immediacy values. Unfortunately, we are able to determine some things, and they're just not very good. The situation July 10th, I don't think will be a good resolution. We still, I believe, have the potential to root out these guys that know how to do the magnetic containment vessels, get them out of whatever holes the government have shoved them into, and haul them up, and we can do this. I think this is a conclusion, so there's reasons I have the conclusion. I won't offer the evidence. You can see for yourself if I'm right or not. Let me say that there's one little bit of evidence I will offer. In the early 1900s, the elites of the time started a wave of let's all suck down radioactive drinks. Most people are not aware of this, but radioactivity in little tiny drinks like energy drinks today became so popular that people were overdosing and dying of drinking radium drinks. But it all stemmed because the elites sucked radiation. We still hear that is true today. That there's a particular component to their vibrational sequence that can deal with radiation in a greater sense better than the larger mass of humanity. Thus, it makes my mind think that this is one of the vehicles they've chosen for their grand elimination scheme for most of humanity.
Really now?
Is to radiate us all, okay? So it is my way of thinking that there will be no solutions, even though there are dozens available. Different kinds of dealing with ways of dealing with radioactive material to de-radioactivize it, so to speak, or ways like I was thinking with the containment vessels to totally contain it and let it exhaust itself and we can worry about it later. I don't think any of those will be successful because I think the powers that be are working desperately at the moment in their final days from whatever it is that they fear. Whatever it is that they fear is very close, and they're doing all of this stuff right now, and they just don't care any longer because they don't have to. So they've ensconced and hidden these time guys away. I've heard it's the same thing has happened in India. India was very big in time research, and some of the top names can't be reached because I was going to go there. To hell with it. Who cares if it's an American or an Indian or a Japanese, or anybody? Let's just fix this, right? We're all humans on Earth. And so I was going to go there, and I found some very great difficulty getting through to people. And I actually had some conduits that I thought would work. And these guys ran into walls and said, something's happened. I can't get at these people. And yet, I saw them 8 weeks ago at so-and-so's wedding. So something's going on, and I think the powers that be want us to be irradiated and will do other things to cause more irradiation. And so I'm making preparations at a personal level to deal with that world.
Oh boy. So this is something that is meant to happen. Hence, we don't get any effort and manpower really on the fix.
Sure. And all you get is TEPCO and lip service, and you know.
Yeah. Is there anything that indicates that the whole Fukushima event will be a point in some way in history or in mankind's journey that this will be the instigator for us to step it up and move towards a new level of, understanding, a new level of dealing with things, or something that causes a schism point here, or is it, or are we screwed? Are we screwed?
I don't know. May be right. We may be screwed, but at the same time, we may come to that deathbed realization because there is a weirdness. We have this concept of a temporal echo, pre-echo and post-echo, to an event within model space. It exists because basically model space for me is like this virtual aquarium filled with all these little hot dots, so to speak, in various colors. Mm-hmm. And so I progress it back and forth in time by doing things with my software to say move ahead a day or go back a day, that kind of thing, right? The way you would scroll through a calendar. Only when I scroll through a calendar, I don't get days. The giant aquarium just changes the organization of the hotspots. And so sometimes you get color indications, hue indications, or intensity indications within the various different little pixels in a particular reference point that show up in the same spot, in the same lexical area, separated by time. And so and this we call an echo. And it's an echo if the color is within the same color scheme and the hue is within the same hue scheme and the intensity is within a particular range. And the tighter it echoes, the more I have a tendency to pay attention to it. And we've got a very tight echo that occurs between July 10th and December 14th. Mm-hmm. Now, the December 14th component of the echo brings up a word that does not exist in the initial lexical set, and that is the word resolution. Now, that is a broad, huge, ambiguous term.
It sure is. Yeah.
Okay, we could resolve the crisis, hooray, or we could all resolve ourselves to the crisis. Mm-hmm. No hooray. Okay, same word, virtually the same sentence construction, yet entirely diametrically opposed positions. So as of this point, I have not enough, because of the nature of the change in language, I don't have enough data for me to say that far out what's going to happen December 14th. Because of the nature of the change in language, I've got a real good shot of saying what's going to occur in July as I go forward in the process of making this next report. Because we're dealing with immediacy language that sort of burns itself out in like 30 days or so, as the overwhelming values I've got, I'm hesitant to say one way or another what the resolve word means relative to this situation in that echo on December 14th, but I'm really sure it's going to come up.
Very interesting. It's yeah, well, we have to see where this pans out. I go from tragedy and hope. Sometimes I just choose not to think about it too much and focus on it. I mean, at the end of the day, if we, I think there's things we can do. There's always that individually and how we, if we're meant to do this or not, we're going to. There's going to be a way that we're going to find, and we're going to, continue the human experience. But it's very disheartening, obviously listening about this stuff, and it's not much coverage on the Fukushima disaster at all at this point. And if it's allowed to happen, even worse. And it's very frustrating.
It was made
very
to happen.
Frustrating.
That's even worse,
Yeah.
So, and there you have to reconcile yourself to a planet filled with individuals that are so psychopathic that they would easily kill off billions of us, that would see that suffering and stuff. And this is the horror part, Let me tell you a little story up here in that orphanage where they put all the 20 yards of soil over the top of the graves that were all of all the little children that were around the orphanage that were all sacrificed. These are indigenous people. They didn't sacrifice any white kids. They went out and they rounded up all these kids at the families under the auspices of the Crown's authority and said, "Oh, you're not teaching these kids right. We're going to haul them into our schools." 50% of those kids did not ever return to their families.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, when the Queen and her scum-sucking, foul-boweled husband showed up here for a review of their crown territories a while back, and we're talking a couple of decades ago, they took back with them 10 kids from this orphanage, none of whom have ever been seen again. And those 10 children were selected out of a group of 30 children. And those 10 were the ones that hustled their ass fastest to kiss the white shoe of the Queen. The others saved. They were saved. Two of those 20, wondered, what happened to my brother? What happened to my sister? And they made a big stink about it. Years later. Well, they've both been killed here recently. Last couple of years, they've both been killed. One of them went into a hospital for a minor procedure, didn't come out, and I won't go into the death of the other one because it reveals too much. But they were both murdered because they were asking too many questions about these, literally blood-drinking, pedophilic, evil scum bastards that we call the elite. If you've got people like myself out there willing to say that, knowing I'm a dead man, I'm dead from the radiation, I'm dead from being born. You're dead the moment you're born, so what the hell? I at least have come to a reconciliation of my own ability to take suffering. I've got, I don't think if we went and counted them, probably well over 1,000 stitches, maybe more in my life. And I know how to take pain. So, it's like, okay, guys, I'm only in pain until the consciousness leaves me. And at that point, you can't harm me anymore. So the most you can do is kill this body. So let's bring it on. I'll tell you exactly what I think of you. I'm not going to hold back. It's 2012. We're going to go through some really horrific shit at the end of this period of time. And I'm saying it now. I'm not swearing an oath or anything, but I'm saying that if I survive long enough and I am presented by universe with that opportunity for retribution, I will allow myself to do so. I will succumb to that nature that is made in me by universe as a warrior, and I will take my revenge. If it should allow it, if universe should grant that. And that's my karmic load, and I'm willing to accept that. And so you got people like myself, old, pissed off, tough, that are just saying, fuck it. You want to fight? Come and find me. I'm not hiding. And I know you for who you are. And hey, I'm one of those guys. I can see you on the stream coming before you even get here. So, let's really get into it. And that's the scary part for them. They don't like, there's this famous story out there. It was told to me by somebody else. I don't know if David Icke has ever told about it or not. But I'll tell about it because a person witnessed this, and this person told the story to me, so I've heard it that firsthand. David Icke had occasion to encounter, I think it was a Rockefeller, And I think they were at an airport. It was in transit. It was in transportation. They were both transiting and their paths crossed. And this individual that observed the encounter between David Icke and this other individual, this person that talked to me, didn't know. I'm supplying that I think it was a Rockefeller. He didn't know who this fat old white guy was that was staring so intently at David Icke, and they had this few words. But this guy, who is a regular sheeple kind of a person, saw that power person, gold, bling all over him, attendees, entourage, all of this kind of stuff, right? Saw that power person visibly vibrate to the point where it was disconcerting to my source. Okay, and so my buddy here says he didn't know what he saw, and that's why I think that he's quite legit in reporting this particular. He knew David Icke. Later, he said, "Oh, I saw that guy." When I was showing him a video, and he said, "I know him. I was, and I was at this airport, and this weird thing happened." And I've had enough weird things happen that my friend who's just a sheeple guy going around doing his job, being a regular slave and stuff. He had a brief occurrence of touch with reality. And what I think was going on then was that I think that they encountered somebody, and because of personal experiences I've had with some really wealthy people that are twisted bastards, and strange things around it, I think that individual that Icke encountered was an adept. Okay, because some of the people among the powers that be are adepts above their ability. Okay, let's categorize reality for a second. We'll do this slice and dice thing, right? There's two types of people in reality: those who can do math.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's just a joke. No, there's actually two types of
okay, I got it. Yeah.
Okay. There's two types of people in reality, and there are the people that are sorcerers, and then there are magicians. And there's a difference between the two. And so we can think of a sorcerer as a person that uses equipment, tools, dowsers, ritualists, the priests. Okay, those are sorcerers. That's why I always refer to the Vatican as the palace of the sorcerers, which is what the word actually means, the Vatican. Okay, but then there's magicians. Now, magicians are the people that are discussed in the books like The Science of Yoga and the Hui Ming Ching and some of the Taoist stuff. And the magicians can be classed into various different groups, novice, skilled, adept, master, and then whatever it is beyond the master. And I think that David Icke encountered somebody that was an adept, somebody that has internalized certain skills through practices that of whatever kind that give them this level of ability, and that they were actually scanning Icke to see what kind of a being he was, what kind of a human he was, right? And that during that process, because of what I know from that process, you have to basically concentrate so much energy outgoing that you're not able to maintain your connection to the universal face, your universal consciousness, if you will, that maintains your body. And so this is where we get that rampant internet rumor about all the people doing the shape-shifting.
Yeah.
Okay, now a lot of that caught on video is not shape-shifting. It's an artifact of the software and how the software
I've never seen that at all. I know about video compression and stuff, and I know that the block, the artifacts that's created when you compress video or whatever creates definitely weird effects. So I would agree with you there. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't trust any of the video ones, but I've actually seen it occur in person, and I've seen it occur in real time where these individuals are so concentrated in the energy of the moment that their connection to the universal consciousness that maintains their body is overwhelmed. Because bear in mind, they're laying a template over that. If you look at David Icke's and other people's theories, what happens is these particular bloodlines are bred such that their tenuous connection through the Shoshona to the materium is disrupted, and another being comes into that body to experience the pleasures of material world, because these other beings are operating at a vibrational level where they don't have pain and pleasure because it exists only through the materium, through the condensate. And so they come down here and they take over a body in order to do things that are, for us, horrific, because they derive sensation from it, and sensation is good for them. They're sensation addicts.
There's no classification that what is good or bad behavior or to produce the sense of things. Basically.
The sensation, correct.
Yeah.
And in fact, they go for wherever the most sensation is that you can possibly get. So they want the most horrific level of intensity, which is, so far as we're concerned, goes to fear, death, horror, maiming, etc. Right? Yeah. And so they create all these practices that keep feeding them.
Now, just a quick question there. Is this voluntary from the people who allow them to go through them, or is that involuntary?
I don't know. I'm not one of those beings, so it would be speculation on my part. I'm not one of those people that will tell you I know when I don't. And that's one of the things that, if I ask somebody and they say, geez, dude, I'm just out here bumbling in the dark like you and I haven't got a fucking clue as to what's going on. Hey, I'll talk to that guy. But if you've got somebody that says, oh, I know this, I know that. No, they're scamming you. They're selling some point of view, right? So no, I don't know. I'm not one of those people. I would hate to think that the being that was born into George W. Bush's body is still trapped there.
Oof, yeah.
I would hate to think that he's participating in that horror that grew out of him. Same thing with the senior Bush or Barbara Bush, any of these individuals, the Queen. In fact, the Queen's actually exposed herself here with this new end of the Jubilee or whatever the hell it is, photo session. Man, I don't know, but if you're vibrationally astute and you look at those photos, not only is the symbolism all throughout there, but there's a vibrational glitch in there that she's not aware she's projecting. I don't know that other people see it because my wife doesn't. And that brings up something else. Let's divert for a quick second here and let me piss off somebody else. That's the guys with the Thrive movie, right? Okay, Catherine Austin Fitz. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yeah, we had her on the program once. Yeah.
Okay, I adore her. She's just a marvelous human. I think she's probably one of the best stand-up humans on the planet. She knows the guy who created Thrive. She contacted me to tell me that she knew him. She thought he was a good guy, that he'd been struggling with all this for years. And I love Catherine. I think she's just the heart and soul of what we've got to be going for. And I've got to say that I unfortunately this time I have to discount her opinion. Not that she's wrong, but that I can't accept that because of the issue of the symbology, because of the issue of the vibration, and because this guy's a rich bastard. Now, I am admittedly prejudiced against the rich. Never met one I liked or that I had any thought as a regular human, any especially inherited money. Oh, these people are terrible. But getting beyond that, here's my problem with this. And I can put it to you. I can say to you, do you remember the period of time in which you were becoming aware?
Yeah, bits of it.
Okay.
Parts
how long
of it.
did it take? Yeah. How long did it take before you ran across the idea of Illuminati symbolism?
Pretty quick.
Okay.
In that process, yeah.
Okay. The guys who made the Thrive movie, when they were asked about the symbology within their movie, blew it off. Foster just blew it off when they asked him in the Webbot forum. They said, oh, yeah. He said, oh, yeah, I can see how you could take our poster as the all-seeing eye.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, hey, let me tell you. The all-seeing eye is the most potent symbol that they've got. It's the top dog symbol. All others stem from that. And I found 13 other Illuminati symbols within that poster alone. I found 250 in the first 40 minutes of that movie. And so my thing for him is, okay, he claims to be an Aikido-ka. He claims to be awake and aware in spite of being, in spite of the pressure of being a rich bastard. Okay, if he's awake and aware and he came through it being rich, hey, more power to him. I grant you that this guy's got some real core key going for him, right? But I'm actually calling bullshit on it. Because what I'm saying is that I, as an individual, am calling bullshit on you, Thrive producers, because I cannot understand how anybody could put 8 damn years of work into a movie that supposedly details their awakening experience and their new understanding of the planet and not understand that a symbol is worth 20,000 pictures, each of which is worth 1,000 words.
Right.
So that's bogus. Either he was totally unaware and if he's a player, he's a player and he caused this symbolic abortion that is the Thrive movement, or he's a dupe. Can't have it both ways. Can't have it anything other than that. And so, yeah, I probably pissed him off, and there's all those people that want Thrive to be real, but they want to believe. They want to believe. So the Illuminati, anytime you want to believe, they're going to throw it out there for you.
Oh, okay. So then I'm back in that question that we touched upon in the first hour a little bit. In other words, there is an interest to try to thwart or sidetrack, then, if you will, if we look at it from your point of view, the so-called truth movement. That, there's something going on here. People are picking up on this stuff. We need to get in there. We need to take things over or hijack it in one way. Is that what you think is going on, or how would we?
Oh, I know that is the case. In fact, I can trace it with my work. That's why I'm under attack so fiercely. is because we are able to trace all of the, as I put it out there, the talking points. That's why I know Drake is a tool, because the talking points he's presenting were written by someone else for him to present. Whether he believes that or not is immaterial. Because a lot of these people that are tools don't understand their tools, just like Wilcock doesn't understand his role as being a useful idiot. And I'm sure I don't grasp my role either. In anything close to its entirety. But indeed, there is a concerted method or movement to overthrow and distract and disrupt and dislodge and break up any concerted growth towards greater enlightenment of the species. The fact that we're enlightening ourselves regardless of that huge amount of energy input to stop us tells me that there's also an outside impetus towards that. And I'm at the point right now where I'm saying it's energetic. It's coming from the materium. And so let's take religion and all that crap out of it. It's not a divine creation thing or any of that. We've got billions and billions and billions, as Sagan would say, although he never really did use that phrase. But we've got billions and billions of beings that are all standing around together in a giant crowd, and we create in the space between us the materium that you and I are inhabiting. This is one way to look at reality, okay? And we are consciously creating it continuously in our giant consciousness selves. And that's consciousness with a big damn C. And you and I are consciousness with a little tiny c. And consciousness with a big damn C out there probably got ticked off at what's going on. And so they're sending in waves that are forcing consciousness with a little c in what they think of as like a virtual reality, like a video game, to change. And the little arrogant, evil, dirty, rotten, Luciferian, scum-sucking bastard Queen and cohort, Federal Reserve, Club of Rome, all of these guys that are working for the space alien agenda on the other side are working desperately to stop that change. They're working desperately to fracture us, to not allow us to come together, and so on. Now, I've actually got a real good philosophical point that says we ought to cooperate with them and do that.
Isn't that the quirk of the thing as well, though? Because the more they push and the more they try to thwart and keep us down, the more we have to step up to the challenge in order to break out of that imprisonment, if you will. In other words, without their part in it, like you mentioned before, we have to have some ups and downs in the system for a incentive for us to evolve at all. Otherwise, we'll sit around on their ass, So they're fulfilling a very important role here. Yeah,
exactly. They're doing their job, and so I'm not particularly. This is why I actually feel compassion. I feel compassion, and it's also pointed at the people that have declared themselves to be my enemies. But I think of them in an Aikido fashion as uke versus nage, the person who is training themselves to execute the throw, and the person who is training themselves to fall. And so one is practicing the throwing arts, and the other is practicing the ukemi art, the falling art. And so you alternate. The person who throws doesn't throw all the time. And so now it is up to us as the dominant species on the planet to instruct our lesser selves, the, evil, dirty, rotten bastards, that it's now their time to learn to fall. We've all learned to fall very well. We know how to do this. Now it's our turn to learn to throw.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this is what we're in the process of doing. Now, if you want to get really spooky and religious about it, you can say that there's this giant beam of energy coming from the space and we're going to all ascend and all that kind of crap. Well, and you could interpret it as that we're all going to become awake and aware and teach these people to fall. I don't put a, conscious creator kind of thing on it or try and put any more labels on it because labels are distracting and they get in the way. As a word guy, you get burnt out on words. I've been doing them too long. And actually, I have of the opinion that I'll be lucky to be able to get a single report out this year because of the flood of the immediacy data and what I know is coming around the corner in this month real quick. And also because of the intense harassment we're getting and so on. So basically for this year, I've had no income. And it is unlikely that past this single report, we'll be able to get another one out. So I'm putting everything I can into this. But at the same time, I've got to warn everybody that, I'm very distracted preparing personally for what I know is just rolling right down on me. And I got to get my shit together. So I'm of the opinion that there's a real potential that I will end up being a refugee, along with a great number of other individuals. And so I'm preparing to be a refugee in as good a fashion as I possibly can. And that this sort of thing is going to be appearing to us relatively soon. I will put out the report, but whether we make it to June 8th and it's available to go out is not in my control.
Okay.
But there's actually hints in the data that if we get this report out, consider it lucky.
All right. Well, we'll stick around and we'll see what happens. It's a fun ride, and we should forget to enjoy being on it a little bit now and then as well. But it's
that's the good part about this. Really,
Yeah.
we were talking about depression and all of that.
Yeah.
We can sum up really well about this thing. The Enlightenment brings the depression. You can't help but get depressed about all of this crap. But at the same time, it has tendency to refine us as individuals. This misogi, this cleansing, this purification, because we are now knowing. And it's not depressing. The information is depressing.
It is what it is, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah.
And the universe is unfolding as it should. So I can take a lot of solace in thinking, okay, I'm a real screw up, but apparently the universe wants me to screw up this way. So hey, more power to me.
All right. That's really good. There you have it in a way. This has been very interesting, different and vital, and some new territory that we've entered into as well. It was interesting talking with you, Clif. Again, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you sharing your perspective with us. The website again here then is halfpasthuman.com. And of course, pick up those Alta reports there if you want to find out more about all the things that Clif has mentioned on the program today. A lot of things, and obviously I wish we had time to go into more detail about them all. But as always, it's just interesting sitting back, enjoying, the discussion and listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very fun, Guy. I enjoy it. You're one of the few people I would disturb myself from the boat shed to chat with. The way I figure it, there's never to be found any walls on any ice, whatever color.
That's a good take. I haven't thought about that. That's great. Thank you again, Clif, for your time.
You're most welcome. Bye.
All right, that concludes our program. Stay tuned to the website for the latest. We'll be back with more before you know it. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us here in the members area. Have a great day or evening wherever you are. And don't forget to enjoy yourself and focus on good things. Amazing things can happen when you do. Stay above it. We'll talk more later. Bye-bye.